Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with a group of awesome people. We're all around the world. So we're here today to talk about Conqueror's Blood, and it will be spoiler filled, at least for Gunmetal Gods at first. But of course, we'll give you a heads up before we get into heavy spoilers for Conqueror's Blood. So if we just go around the room, and Zamil, if you want to kick us off and tell us about yourself and what time it is for you where you are on planet Earth.
Sure. I'm Zamil Akhtar, the author of Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood. It's 3 in the afternoon here, so I was just now I was having a late lunch, and then I realized we had to do this chat 1 hour earlier because of daylight savings time. So I'm happy I got here on time though, just like you know by the smallest margin. So
And PL, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm PL Stewart, author of the Drowned Kingdom saga. Eastern Standard Time. It's now 7 a.m., but really 6, and my body feels like it's 3 in the morning. But I'm here. Wouldn't be anywhere else. I was so excited to do this. I've been thinking about this for weeks to get together with all you folks and talk about Zamil's amazing second book. So yeah, thanks for having me.
And Lana?
Hi, I'm Lana from the channel Lore and Lullabies, and I'm on the east coast of Australia, and it's currently 9 p.m. here. So we're all winding down, except me. I've been like bouncing all day waiting for this. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this because I have many tabs. If you can see that.
Yeah. I have these you can't see the page folds, but yeah, they're all over the place.
Hold on, PL. You fold your pages? I don't know if we can be friends anymore.
Well, I do unfold them at the end, but yeah, initially I must admit I'm a page folder, and it's funny. I have 10,000 bookmarks, literally. Like you should see how many bookmarks I have. Like, people send me books or books like my own, but I still end up folding them. It's so counterproductive, but yeah.
And just before we kick off, I am Mountain Standard Time, and it is 5 a.m. for me, which is really 4, but with daylight savings time. But like PL said, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So thanks for everyone for coming together. We're all over the planet, so it's really neat to do this, especially. So Lana, you want to kick us off and tell us about some of your tabs?
So I have quite an intense sort of tabbing system. I do have like a little key here. I don't know if you can see, and I have really messy writing. But the green is all the world building. Yellow is for characters, like if there's like a major character development or someone's new introduced or anything like that. Red for this book, it's not usual, but for red it was all of the plot points or bits that I got angry. The pink is for love or like romance or relationships. Purple is like my favorite quotes and favorite parts of the book. Light blue is for lore and history, and blue is for when I was sad. When I got sad.
Oh, that deserves that. I don't know what to say.
And then there's like highlights throughout it as well. I can't find one right now, but there's one. I like highlight my books as well.
Wow.
Only the ones that I know I'm going to like and keep and never unhaul, they get written in and highlighted and all that.
Wow. Nice. Very impressive.
That's the most comprehensive system I've seen. I'm amazed.
Yeah. And good morning, fun. Joshua. He's over.
Hey, Joshua.
Oh, hey, Joshua. Yeah, that's amazing, Lana. I don't even know what to say. Like, I feel ashamed now.
And I'm like, oh,
wow, that's impressive. How did you come up with that system?
Watching a lot of other YouTubers, and because I like used to just have 3 colors, and that was for green for world building, yellow for plot, and like pink for what I liked. But it just wasn't enough, especially when reading like dense fantasy. So I expanded, and there are quite a few annotating videos on BookTube that are really good. But yeah, that's just my weird method.
Wow.
Pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I suck at note taking, so it's just easier to be like, what was that thing? And then I can just go.
Wow.
So
I
crazy.
feel like as authors, we should be doing something similar. So we retain more of the books that we read and have more of a sense why that book was good or why it wasn't good. But I don't know. In school, like I was the person who in school never took notes. It just I couldn't do it.
Well, with your book, it's just so. I feel like with your book, it's so vivid. Like it's still in my head. Like I read your book, I think 3 books ago now, but it's still in my head. Especially some of the images are just, and I know we're gonna get into it later, but the things you brought out in this book were so different from Gunmetal Gods, and it's weird. Like the gods were really important, obviously, in the first book, but now I have that image in my head that's just like I can't get it out, like of the gods specifically, like that I didn't have in the previous book to the same degree. Like now it's like I can see them, right? So yeah.
I hope they're not giving you nightmares, though.
It's just a feeling of being odd. Like, it's almost like when you look at like a painting of like Shiva or Lakshmi, right? And you can go anywhere and see those images. But now I have an image of like, well, I won't spoil. We'll talk about spoilers later, but I got lots of questions on that. But anyways, yeah, it was amazing. Wow. So
Yeah, lots of questions.
I'll zip to the spoiler part.
Yeah, I don't think it'll take us long to get into spoilers, but it's the second book in the series. But Zamil, what was your plans for this book going into it? What did you have in your mind? What did you want to accomplish with it?
It was a tough book to write because of the way Gunmetal Gods ended. I was never sure I was going to write book 2. So when I ended Gunmetal Gods, I wanted it to be somewhat conclusive and satisfying for people who would just read that book. And if in the case it was going to be my only book in the series. So when I started Conqueror's Blood, it was a challenge because I wasn't sure how to start it. There didn't seem to be that many threads that were thick enough to really get the book going. So I ended up creating a whole new thread and setting the book 1 year after the events of Gunmetal Gods, and mainly trying to continue the story thematically instead of grasping the same characters who had kind of resolved their arcs in book 1. So I wanted to thematically continue the story. And at first, I wanted to do it with a character from book 1. I wanted to take the character of Sadie and sort of continue her story and see where things would go. And I actually started writing the book with that in mind, but that kind of didn't work out. And I was stuck for a while. And then I had this idea of creating whole new characters that could embody the ideas and the themes that I wanted to talk about in this book. So I think the main thing is that not only do the cast of characters change, the setting also changes. And that also gave me a lot of freedom to kind of develop a whole new conflict and still relate it to the conflict of book 1, but have it be its own thing. And I also wanted it to be more of a story that was not just about 2 sides fighting each other, but more about the same side kind of imploding upon itself, fracturing, and just coming to blows, and having it be a different kind of story than Gunmetal Gods, but also still continue that sort of overarching theme and overarching concept of having one side against another and having the two sides very similar, but also embody somewhat different different beliefs and different ideas. So in that sense, I wrote the book, and it it turned out the way it turned out. I was very happy, and it's probably still my favorite book that I've written.
I just want to say, like, because I went into Conqueror's Blood trying not to hear too much about it, and so therefore I think it was fortunate for me. So I was expecting a pure sequel. I was expecting those character arcs to continue directly. I was expecting to see, okay, so what does Kevin do now? Like, where is he going to be when we start Gunmetal God? So I'm assuming that when we start Conqueror's Blood. So I'm assuming we're going to pick it up, and by at least chapter 1 or 2, we'll be into like Kevin, right? And obviously that's not what happened. The first, right away you could see it was going somewhere very different after a couple of chapters. But it's so funny because I loved Keva, and I was looking for a story to continue. But by the time I got to chapter 3 or 4, I forgot all about him, and I was so into the stories of Zedra and Sierra. Like, I was so invested in them that later on when Keva shows up, it's like, oh shoot, yeah, I forgot about Keva, right? Like, and that's why I think your genius is that, especially for readers who loved Gunmetal Gods the way we all did, and then you had us hooked on these certain characters, and then you took it, now they're more like cameos, some of them in this book, and they're not, but these new characters are just so like, oh my god, like, that's genius, man, that you could do that. So
yeah, it felt like a big risk to take, because you can lose readers and you can lose the enthusiasm when you change up too much. But as an author, sitting and trying to write this story, I had to put the ideas that I wanted into it, and I felt like Syra and Zedra, they could embody those ideas much better than if I just brought Kiva back and maybe gave Kiva a new adversary and continued the story that way. He as a character couldn't embody the conflict that I wanted to present in the book. So it was a big risk, but I like you said, I feel like it paid off, and I feel like it made the book kind of its own thing. It could even be a standalone story in some respects. So yeah, I think that's probably just my approach, that for me it's just about making sure that the story can embody the ideas and the things that I want to tell, instead of just trying to rehash the same story as Gunmetal Gods, but in a slightly different way and call it a sequel.
Yeah, it was so well done, because you did warn us that Conqueror's Blood was going to be different, but I did not expect that. And I think in doing it that way, you actually opened up for like people that may not have, because I feel like Gunmetal Gods was like quite dark, whereas this was like not as dark. So I feel like even if people who wouldn't necessarily like Gunmetal Gods, I feel like they would really like Conqueror's Blood. It's like, yeah, because I was talking to my friend about it, and she doesn't read grimdark, but I was like telling her about the plot. Sorry. And yeah, she was just like, oh, that sounds really good. I was like, please just read it. I need more people to talk to about this book.
Yeah, that's the rough thing about it being a book too, I guess, is that people, even if I say like, oh, it can be read as a standalone, most people won't approach it that way. I guess that's just how the book reader mindset is, and the market is that when you have a series, you got to go in sequential order. And I've seen other authors try to do it where you can have different books be jumping in points and starting points. It doesn't seem to quite always work. So I don't push the idea that it's a standalone too much, even though it is, just for that reason alone. But I'd actually be curious to have more readers who haven't read Gunmetal Gods read it and let me know like what their experience was. I guess one thing I did less of in Conqueror's Blood, because it was a book too, is I did less hand holding in regard to setting up the world and setting up the different religions and the different ideas. It was, I didn't really stop too much on those things because they'd already been done in Gunmetal Gods. So that might be a challenge for people trying to get into this book as if it was a book one. But I would be curious to see, and I would actually like more people to read it who haven't read Gunmetal Gods and just let me know what they think.
I feel like what I loved the most about Conqueror's Blood was that, whereas in Gunmetal Gods you had two characters that were very much on opposing sides and separated and didn't know each other, didn't even speak the same language, and were separated by distance and culture and things like that. Whereas in Conqueror's Blood, you had two characters who were actually friends, but were on different sides. And to see, it's one of those things where what I had in my head was, think about being friends with somebody and you're in their sphere, you're in their orbit, but you don't know every single thing that's going on with them. And meanwhile, your friend is living a very, hiding a lot of dark secrets, and you're also hiding a lot of dark secrets from your friend. And it's when those dark secrets clash, that's when, because other than those dark secrets, you have this commonality and this bond, and you trust them and you think they're great. But meanwhile, you're actually on the complete opposite side, right? And it's because you're hiding things from them and they're hiding things from you, right? And I think that was the way you did that was just phenomenal. Like, that was so well done. And that's what I loved about this book, was the fact that it was all about, really, it was the essence of it was friends hiding secrets. And when those secrets come to light, it's explosive, right? And they're not just any secrets. It's not like, oh, do you know I smoke and I didn't tell you. I go and secretly have darts behind the building, but you know what? No, it's a lot more serious than that, honestly, right? So,
yeah. For me, looking at the story, I wanted it to be one where the dueling characters, Syra and Zedra, interact throughout the story. So whereas in Gunmetal Gods, Kiva and Micah are separate for most of the story, and yeah, they never have a real conversation, and they really only collide strongly toward the end of the book. With Conqueror's Blood, I wanted these two characters to constantly be, even at the part where they don't know who their enemy is, they don't know it's the friend who's their enemy. Even in those parts, I wanted it to be where they were constantly fighting each other and constantly opposing each other throughout all sections of the story. And that and making them friends at the beginning of the story and making them know each other well, and making sure that they had an understanding, that was a big part of that. And it was like you said, you could have a friend and something actually, let's talk about a current event. Here in Dubai, I know a lot of people that are Russians and a lot of people that are Ukrainians, and they're all friends. Everyone is friends with each other. And then this war happens, and all of a sudden, these people who were friends, now, it's kind of awkward. They're kind of awkward with each other. And, so things happen where you and your friend can get can end up on opposing sides, and it can happen very suddenly. So, I wanted to tell that kind of story here, and it's very different from Gunmetal Gods in that sense. But I also wanted it to have as much conflict and as much, I wanted there to be as much at stake as in Gunmetal Gods.
And how did you keep track of all the different storylines and all the different characters? Because there was a lot of maneuvering and trying to get in the right position.
And scheming.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the other thing. I wanted there to be a lot more political intrigue, and I wanted the political intrigue to not just be to be somewhat realistic, to reflect actual history, and to also just be constantly surprising and constantly an aspect where the reader really doesn't know what's going on. So, as part of the world building process, I created all these different factions and put them in this city and made them part of this kingdom. And the real question is, which side is which faction on? And sometimes these factions will switch sides, and it will all depend on what their calculus is or what is best for them. So keeping track of who is on what side, who is doing what, when was something happening, when was something else happening. It was all part of planning the story and making sure that this story would make sense. Unlike Gunmetal Gods, which was not that complex with the political intrigue, here it was a lot more to keep track of. But I just made sure that, as I developed the plot, that all the pieces were in place. That was a very important part of the big picture of the story.
When you describe this, here is where, excuse me, I feel like this book, when you talk about, your books being very much, Game of Thrones-ish, here's where I really felt more than Gunmetal Gods that this was the Game of Thrones-ish type. I mean, it's very original, so it's not even fair to, but we're using a comparator here that even you use that. The whole a Song of Ice and Fire is about all these crazy, warring, petty, really, in the grand scheme of things, factions and betrayals and switching sides and all this, but they don't really know what the macro is, right? And in Game of Thrones, of course, the macro is the others and that existential threat, right? From ice zombies, essentially. But that's so in this book, that's what I really felt. That I felt that these guys are all, scheme, maneuvering, backstab each other. They're worried about this, this align with this faction, betraying this faction. And meanwhile, the macro, because the macro is really what's the threat is. And they don't realize that all of this warring and fighting and backstabbing and political intrigue, they're just pawns for bigger players, right? And even the bigger players are it was just fantastically done. And so it was this book when I really felt that, not the same degree as I did in Gunmetal Gods. This is a book when I felt that Game of Thrones is, the mortals think that they're, all these little schemes matter, but really, so yeah, that was really well done.
Yeah, I think the cosmic horror really does contextualize everything as you described. And even in our life here on Earth, we wouldn't know it if, like, some meteor, I don't want to scare anyone, but if some meteor was hurtling toward Earth right now, we would have no idea, and we would just continue feuding with each other, and all of our petty concerns would be on our mind. But once the cosmic horror comes into the story, and that's kind of when the whole conflict does become contextualized. And the purpose of it, is to put the pettiness, as you said, the pettiness of the conflict into light. And that's kind of I would say the theme of the story, is that you have this cycle of violence between these two sides, and ultimately when you weigh that against the element, the horrificness of the gods, and of the cosmic horror in the story, when you weigh these two things, the cycle of violence just seems very petty. And it's so petty that the gods themselves are exploiting it to their own ends. So that's kind of the driving theme of the whole series. And definitely with book 3, I want to get into that even more. And I want to take it to places where even Game of Thrones wasn't going. Like you said, with Game of Thrones, there's the others, and these ice zombies basically that are coming. But for me, I want to make it even more, because we're dealing with a full-on cosmic horror idea here. Something very Lovecraftian. Something I want to make it even more horrifying, and even more just like gut-wrenching in that sense. So that's kind of my goal with book 3, is to bring that even make that even more forceful, and make that even more like just horrifying for the reader.
I think we can probably go ahead and get into spoilers. What does everybody think? Lots to talk about. Okay, everyone's been warned to get into spoilers for Conqueror's Blood, and who wants to kick us off? Everybody's smiling.
Okay. I can't wait any longer. I've been holding this in since I read the book, and obviously waiting, like so anxious for this podcast and waiting to see you guys again and talk to you about this. Is Lat dead? Is Lat dead? Like we've been hearing about Lat. She's been omnipresent in both books, and she's the overarching of all of the deities and sub deities and angels. Like Lat is always referred to in one form or another, but then we get to see her, and that was, oh my god, wow. So you don't need to tell me, but if you get, is Lat actually dead?
Well, I will say that the basic premise here, when you have gods that are on two different sides, it's sort of like it's sort of like the gods themselves don't want to fight each other directly, so they will use other pawns to do the fighting for them. So whether or not Lat is dead, I cannot say, because we'd be going into book 3. But for all intents and purposes, from where we're standing, yeah, she is dead. So what that will mean to the people who worship Lat, to the kingdoms that kind of depend on what she was providing, behind the scenes, what they didn't realize she was providing, or what they didn't realize she was protecting them from. What that will mean to these people, that is definitely something that we will see in book 3. But since we're dealing with gods, I can't say objectively whether or not they are dead in the sense that we would, define death. So yeah, we'll just have to see in book 3.
Go ahead, Lana, if you have a question. Oh, okay.
I know Lana's tied up. Hopefully get to her question soon, but okay. So obviously I've been bursting with all these questions, right? So one of the things I loved about Conqueror's Blood was, and it was a heavy theme for me in this book, excuse me, was the concept of guilt. So everybody's guilty about something in this book. I loved it, and it was driving them all crazy. All these secrets. Especially with with Sierra and Zedra, like they had so much guilt that they were dealing with, right? You know, Sierra's guilty about feeling that spiritually she's a sinner, and who she's messing around with, both both Adrith and Vera, right? So she's guilty about both those things. She's guilty about the plot that she's involved in with Hadrith. She's guilty about, like, I can go on, but she's guilty about all these things. And then of course, Zedra, who's this, centuries old sorceress, and is shape shifting and killing people, and like she's guilty about everything, right? And like so much of this book was about their guilt and the oppressive weight of that on their shoulder, like, and that was so well done. Was that something you were really looking to bring out in this book? Was this enormous sense of guilt and remorse about everything you're doing, but you can't stop, right? Like you can't stop because these are all your main goals, right? And like was that part of what you were trying to accomplish?
Absolutely. When I look at history and I see what certain people did to gain power, I have to wonder, were these people psychopaths, or were they always feeling guilty all the time about what they did? And I think both could be true for different people. I think power does attract psychopaths to some extent, but some people in power also probably felt very guilty about the things that they had to do. And I think the latter interests me more in terms of exploring those kind of characters. So in all four main characters in this series, none of them have been psychopaths. They've all been sort of grounded in some sort of morality. And when they have to justify what they're doing, either they have to twist that morality in some sense, or they just have to compartmentalize and just accept that, yeah, I have to do these messed up things, but it's for a greater good. And we just have to focus on the greater good. So I think these kind of things are very interesting to me. And because I can't get into the head of a historical figure. Like I can't open Alexander the Great's brain and see whether he was a psychopath or whether he was doing things because he had a grand vision for humanity and for his people. But I can, as an author, create characters who are like these historical figures and just explore that aspect that you're describing, and how they would feel doing something that's so obviously wrong, but doing it for a reason which they believe to be right. What at your core would you be feeling, and what kind of pain would you be going through, and how would it affect your decision making? How would it affect how you see the world? After a while, would you just become numb to it? All these things I wanted to explore with Syra and Zedra, and that was absolutely at the core of the book.
Yeah, I found it really interesting the way, because even as I was reading, like at the very beginning, I was like, Syra's my girl. Like she's good, she's pure, like she's just trying to do the right thing. And Zedra was like this all-powerful sorceress, but was doing these horrible things. And then I was just like, when does it get to the point where you're like, enough is enough? Like, where's the line that you draw? And this sort of theme was apparent in Gunmetal Gods as well, but I liked the way you sort of shifted it a bit in Conqueror's Blood, because yeah, it was so fascinating watching Syra go from this kind of pure young woman to what she becomes. And it was almost like Zedra went the opposite way. She was like, okay, this is my point. My point has been reached. I can't anymore. I refuse. Like, and I was surprised by that, because I just thought she was going to go gung ho to the very end. And like when she was given the like choice, not really a choice, but when she was told to use Celine, I was just like, don't do it. And then when she didn't come out of the glass tower in the glass district, I was just like, oh, she didn't. And I was so mad at you. I was like, no. And then yeah, but it was okay. And I wasn't mad at you until later on. I was mad at you again.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to characters, I want the story to test them and to show us who they really are. So even like take your friend, you don't really know who that person is. Put them in a zombie apocalypse and then you'll find out who they are, right? So I wanted the story to test both Syra and Zedra and test them to their absolute limit and to see what they were and weren't willing to do and whether they were or weren't willing to do these things again and again and again. And in that way, you'd come to know who the character really is. So in the beginning, it does seem like, yeah, Syra is the good one, Zedra is the evil one. But when you really get into it, Zedra is the way she is because of all the things she experienced and all the horrors that she went through. And she herself believes she's doing the right thing and she's fighting for the truth. And she believes this at her core. And Syra, meanwhile, is just going through life, just living life and in the beginning sort of taking it easy, not and she becomes slowly more and more ambitious. And that ambition kind of brings out her true character in the sense that, to put it simply, she wants power and she wants it for complex reasons, not just for its own sake. She wants it because she thinks it'll make her feel safe. She wants it because she has this sense that her people and who she is, uh, there should be something greater to it. She shouldn't just be in this, in this patch of dirt far away, living this nomadic lifestyle. She feels like she's worth something more than that. So she has some, pretty relatable reasons for why she wants power. And the things she has to do to gain that power, I think, bring out her character. So that's what the whole story was about for me, exploring this aspect and just making sure that we really got to know the characters. We really got to know their limits.
I think what I saw, a lot of the motivations were for both characters came down to things involving love and almost this found family thing where they were both really wanted to be accepted by certain people. They both wanted love. And love drove a lot of their motivations. Zedra would do anything to protect her son, right? And she also would do anything for her father, right? And wanting to satisfy, those feelings, and of course with Syra, looking for love, acceptance, looking for family because in some way she feels displaced from a real family, even though she mourns them. She mourns her real family that are gone. She feels a sense of attachment to her brother and her family and her childhood friend, and who she ends up with, of course, and to that life. But at the same time, she wants to be, essentially the queen of the sand palace. She, like you said, she's so ambitious, but she's searching for love too, and that's why she gets hooked up with Hadrith and his crazy schemes, and that's why she feels so guilty about being Vera. Like, she's looking for love and acceptance. She wants to be Tamaz's daughter, essentially, right? She wants to have that, she's not by blood, but she wants to have that feeling. They're both looking for this love, this acceptance. And, I feel like that drives so much of the plot. And I thought, again, it was just phenomenally done the way you did it. And it's just fascinating that at the end of the day, as ambitious as both they were for their own reasons, a lot of it was they were looking for love, right? So I thought that was.
I think
And-
Syra. Sure.
Oh, sorry. And just to build on that as well and add another layer of complexity, it was like, especially with the whole found family thing, like, how do you, as someone who's coming into the palace as a slave, how do you find your place? Like, you're given like stature, but it's not really home. And at the end of the day, you're still a slave. Like, you don't have free will. You're still have to do what you're told to do, and all of these other people, if they tell you to go somewhere, you have to do it. Like, you're still a slave at the end of the day, but you still have to try and find your place and your power within that and still try and get to where you want to be. And it was just so complex, and I loved every single part of it.
That was a big thing. The theme of fitting in, and the theme of fitting in and being loved and just feeling like you belong in a place. That was a big part of it, and especially for both of them, but in particular for Syra, because she actually, at her core, she just wanted to fit into this new place that she didn't choose to be brought there. She was forcibly brought there, but she wanted to make the most of her life, and she wanted to just be accepted by the people there as as anyone would be. But as you said, this is a complex place, this palace where people have different statuses and people have different titles, and it's even more complex than that. You could be a slave, but you could also be very powerful. So the complexity for someone like Syra coming into this environment, it was very difficult. Just to adapt to it, and to her whole life is kind of this struggle to belong and to fit somewhere and to be accepted. And I think that that's kind of very much at the root of why she's driven to do what she does, in that if she can't be accepted in this place and fully loved and embraced, she'll just remake the whole place in her own image, in her own with her own sensibilities. And that's kind of what she starts to do toward the end of the book, when she forges this alliance between her tribe and the tribe that was her tribe's enemy for generations. So when she's able to do this, and she's able to rise to the top, for her, that was kind of the only way she was going to be truly accepted in this place. So it was kind of like inevitable for her that she had to do this. And I think that's kind of why, for me personally, Syra is kind of my favorite character, I think, in the whole series, because like for me, when I moved from Saudi Arabia to the US, I kind of had a similar experience where it was a struggle to fit in, and it was, you don't know whether you belong to this new place or whether you belong to the old place. You're kind of in between now, and you don't fit in here and you don't fit in there. So, you kind of sometimes have to make your own world, in a sense, where of people who are like you, a world where you belong. So that's kind of Syra's whole journey in this story.
I feel like one thing you did that I'm still thinking about, and I think about constantly, is that you, in a way, at the end of the book, you gave the characters what they needed, but not what they thought they wanted. And that really left an impression on me. With Syra, to start off, with Emmy, and of course they start off being, he mocks her, and he makes her, he's trying, he's being tough and cool, like, she's nothing, she's not shapely, she's not attractive, and it's more of a kind of like a banter thing at first, but and then of course he falls deeply in love with her, and eventually she falls in love with him. And then, of course, it's a point where you think he's not going to make it, and then you think they might have this happily ever after, but then because of the things that she does, he ends up hating her and rejects her, and she winds up with Bashang, right? And that whole part was just, to me, that was actually one of the most gut-wrenching things of the book, that, you know, I was like, oh my God. And then like that scene when she's, you know, he's locked himself away from her and she's begging him, saying, I love you, please. You know what I mean? And he's like, he ain't having it, right? But you know, obviously she does. And at first you think, is this more political that she wants it with Bashing? And part of it is, but obviously, you know, they grew up together, right? So I mean, but so she didn't get necessarily what she wanted or who she wanted, but she kind of got what worked the best for her. But at this, and in some ways the same thing with Zedra, because, you know, I think there was a point in this story where she just wanted to be free of being this century years old person, seeing her children, her grandchildren die, and going through all this trauma. And as long as her son was safe, I think she was okay with just letting go and just not having to do all these horrible things anymore. But of course, you know, as any being, you want to cling on to life, right? But I think, you know, you gave her what she needed the most, which was to be set free and knowing that her son was safe, right? So I found that just, it was, again, incredibly done, and just like fascinating that the characters didn't necessarily get what they wanted, but they kind of got what they needed in the end. It wasn't the outcome that they would have written for themselves, but, you know, you wrote them an outcome that was actually palatable. So
Yeah, with Zedra, I think for her, the weight of the whole world is resting on her shoulders. That's how she feels. And for anyone to have that kind of weight on them, it's probably not sustainable. And it's probably, no matter how much conviction you have, no matter how much drive you have, at some point you probably just want to throw it all down and just want to sink into the background. And I think by the end of the story, Zedra has come to that point where it's just too much for her. And it's not that she doesn't believe what she believes, but it's that the challenges have to some extent defeated her. And she would gladly, as you say, just live a life with her son and make sure that her son grows up to, you know, to be happy and healthy and take his place in this kingdom. But obviously she can't escape the repercussions of what she's already done in the story. So in that sense, it's sort of tragic that she does eventually come to a point where she probably she is regretful of a lot of things, but by then it's just too late. The punishment is already, you know, already upon her in that sense. So yeah, that you know, like you said in the beginning, her and Syra kind of start in different places, and then they just go like this. And yeah, that trajectory was, you know, something which you know, for me was very satisfying to do.
Did you always sort of want it to go that way, or did it just sort of just go that way and you just let it do what the characters wanted to do? With
Well,
a little meddling.
actually, I'd wanted Gunmetal Gods to go in that direction. And when I was writing Gunmetal Gods, I did write initially a much darker ending where Kiva ends up kind of in a similar position to Syra in Conqueror's Blood, in that he goes through with his worst, with enacting sort of his you know, similar to what Syra does in the end, where she just says, I'm doing it, you know, it doesn't matter what the consequences are, I'm going through with it. And I always wanted to tell this kind of story where a character, it's basically a corruption arc. You know, a character goes through a corruption arc, and it's done in a way where you fully understand why the character does that. And I think for Kiva, the reason I didn't do that is it just didn't work, in that it didn't work for his character. He wasn't that much of an ambitious person at his core. Kiva just wanted to go to some village and chill. He wasn't.
Hi.
Hey,
It's only 8:45 p.m. here, so we had some kind of time mix-up. I'm still in public, so I don't want to interrupt the conversation you guys are having. I gotta go, but I just wanted to pop in and just say I'm so sorry for the mix-up. I'm gonna try to get home before you guys finish.
cool.
I'm gonna do my absolute best. Love you all. Be back soon.
Have fun.
See you soon.
Bless her.
So yeah, with Kiva, it wouldn't quite have worked because he was not that much of an ambitious person. He just wanted to live a peaceful life. He was more driven by revenge and anger. But with Syra, she does have sort of this ambition to her that made her choice in the end make sense, and made this corruption arc make sense. And opposing her in regard to Zedra, for her arc was, I wouldn't say it was a redemption arc. It wasn't quite that, but it was more of a tragedy, and it was more of a real a point where you realize something, but it's too late in that sense. So, and maybe she could have been redeemed. It's quite possible if she was able to escape, and if she was able to, live for some time longer and reassess what she wanted to do, she could have redeemed herself. But in this story, it just wasn't her fate. So that's how it ended for her.
I think that was really well done. Really well done, because I was like, how is this gonna play out? And then the whole thing with the order in the books and how they made Escher, like, from memory, like, transcribe this book, and then for it to be Nora, and then it just blew my mind. I was like, what? And also, because the whole way through the book, I was like, who does her son belong to? Like, who is her son? Because he's obviously not a Siliquel. Is that how you say it? I was like, obviously not that, but then whose kid is this? And then for it to go the way that it does, I was just like, whoa, that is crazy and brilliant. And then for it to almost, it comes full circle, but like you said, it's not in like a redeeming way. It's not in like a happy way. It is a tragedy, and it was just sad. And I just felt for her. And I do have a blue tab for that because it says sad.
Yeah, for me, the most poignant thing, I think, that brought about Zedra's downfall was her obsession with blood, and her obsession with her own blood and her own ancestry and her own bloodline, and her sort of belief that because she descends from a certain bloodline, her and her son are superior and are destined to rule, this whole kingdom. And her downfall is basically that she doesn't have this blood, and her son doesn't even have this blood. And it was all just a cruel game that was being played, where she was just a pawn. And, I think being a Middle Easterner, in this region, people are too obsessed with who is my ancestor, my ancestor was this king who had lived in this time period, and or my ancestor was this religious guy, and people actually talk about this stuff. And for me, it's being a Middle Eastern, it's like, man, who cares, So that was kind of part of the inspiration for that aspect of Zedra, and yeah, I felt like it was just the ultimate irony for her to actually realize this, and to actually realize that she's not, this, this last surviving person from this destined chosen line. So for me, that was, that was very satisfying to write about.
Yeah, I sorry, go ahead, Lana. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, just in regards to the blood and the different bloods and the taste of the bloods, where did that come from?
That's a good question. I think that, so the idea for the flavor of blood, some of it just comes from a lot of other books and stories with blood magic, but I wanted to put a different spin on it, where I wanted to kind of make it have a logic. So it's not just, oh, you use this special blood and XYZ is going to happen. I wanted there to be somewhat more of a logic to it, and not to make it a fully hard magic system, but to have it have some rules, and to have it have some basis to it, so that throughout the story, Zedra could solve problems potentially with her blood magic, and she does do that throughout the story. And I wanted that to be kind of a fun aspect, where she's kind of harvesting people for their blood to some extent, and she's keeping certain people around because their blood has uses. So I wanted that to kind of be an aspect in the story. And for me, magic systems are just fun. Even Syra, the magic that she awakens to, I want to explore that a lot more. I want to explore these magic systems a lot more in book 3. And for me, that's a lot of the fun in writing these kind of stories. It's just having these crazy magic systems that, while they can do completely insane things, there is still some logic to it. And I think we've seen we've also seen with Kiva, he has his own access to magic that's completely different from Zedra and from Syra. So I want to look into that more also in book 3. So for me, it's just a lot of fun. And I spend a lot of time thinking about magic and how it will play a part in the story.
Yeah, it was incredible. And what I loved about specifically, it's funny that Lana mentioned the blood, because that was exactly the track that was going on. Bit of a different point is that because you created the blood magic system the way you did, you had the reader thinking that there was this internal caste system with the blood magic, that if you had God's blood or angel's blood or etc., that you were potentially more important, and your lineage was greater than other people. And until the point we realized it was all just a sham, the reader's thinking that, hey, if you had angel's blood or God's blood, you were more important. And the thing I loved about that, and you talk about the Middle East, that so many places in the world have formal caste systems, but everyone in the world has informal caste systems, right? And it's all about, if you take North America, about whether it comes down to how long your ancestors have been living in this place, being descended from so and so. A lot of that's tied to money and affluence. But if you were, say, in the United States, well, I'm a Vanderbilt, right? Well, what does that mean, right? Well, I'm descended from a powerful, rich, influential family. But there's lots of powerful, rich, influential, because it's well, we're old money, right, versus new money. So the world exists in all these kind of imposed, human imposed caste systems in a way. In the Middle East, it's a lot more formal, right? Where there's actually broken down, and like you said, there's this very specific, detailed logic to why you're part of one caste, say in somewhere like India versus another, or other parts of the Middle East. But when you add what you did with the blood magic, is you had the reader feeling that that really existed, right? That oh, like this person, well, this person must be really special because they have angel blood, for example, right? And and it's just funny how then you tore it down, and it was such a unique uh, device that you did that, because for me it was symbolic of the fact that, yeah, like, it's all a fallacy in real life, that all these caste systems and divisions that we make between ourselves according this importance to this person versus this person needs to, it's all just a fallacy. It needs to be torn down. We need to stop thinking that this person is more important because they came from this bloodline, or this, because I'm a royal. I was the House of Windsor. Well, they're people, right? Like, because they're descended from 15 generations from this person. Why is someone who's descended 15 generations from William the Conqueror better than me, right? And that's what I loved about the way you deconstructed. Like, that's part of the brilliance of your writing, that you deconstruct things like that, and they're really meaningful at the end, and you keep us, you have us thinking, oh, and then at the end the mirage vanishes, right? And I loved how you did that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, one of the key themes. And I think I also mentioned that the king or the Shah and the Shah's brother and the Shah's son, they all have the most common type of blood. So these are the people who literally the whole country believes that they are destined to be the rulers, and they have the greatest stature among all the people, but they have the most common flavor of blood out of everyone. So that kind of shows that the flavor of blood has no impact on what your capacities are in actual life, and what place you have in society. And building this is also why I wanted to set Conqueror's Blood in a new kingdom, because I wanted to build this complex stratification of society. And like you mentioned, I wanted it to have sort of a caste system, and while at the same time I wanted to show that it is possible in a society like this to go from being at the bottom and to just rise up, because ultimately what creates power is power. So people will if you are a Salukal and you are descended from the previous king, people will accept your rule as long as you can enforce it. The moment you can't enforce your rule, you're gone. Someone else is going to take over and enforce their rule, and they're not going to care that you were descended from this dynasty that went back 600 years. They're not going to care. They're going to start their own dynasty. They're going to have their own sense of destiny, and they're going to claim that they're whatever they want to claim, whether it's they're divinely appointed to rule or whatnot. They're going to create their own system and their own sort of their own aura and their own legitimacy for their rule. So you see Syra doing this. As soon as she takes power, she changes the religion of the whole country so that it will suit her position more. And she, in book 3, you'll see that she's going to go even further than that, because she's just taken power, but the average person is not going to see her as being legitimate. They're going to see her and these basically these nomadic horsemen. They're like Mongols, basically. They just came in and they took over, and people are going to be like, why should these people rule us? But so they're going to have the challenge of creating this legitimacy and you'll see that for Syra, it's going to be very focused on religion and using this, this sect that she has adopted, which she was actually born into, but she's readopted it now. We're going to see how she sort of uses that to legitimize her rule and to stabilize her rule. So I really wanted to play with these ideas where, someone in real life will just say, oh yeah, I'm the rightful ruler of this country because my father was so and so and I should be ruling this country. But can you enforce your power? That's really the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think and again, it was so brilliantly done. So we have at the beginning, in a largely patriarchal world, that two women end up being the people that everybody goes, hey, what do I do now? Or what do I do now? Or now, you have to listen to me. And, they use whatever they can to get to that point where everybody has to listen to them and where they're the ones deciding the fate of everybody else. Right. And I what I loved about that was there's this point in the book when, of course, especially for someone like Zedra, or who people thought Zedra was, they're kind of like, well, why should we listen to you? Right. And well, I'm the mother of the future Shah, right? And and that means something, right? And then with Syra, she's got the military backing now behind her. And she went from, okay, she was supposed to be the wife of the future Shah, and then that got taken away, right? But then there's that point where, no, okay, well, what are we going to do? Because now you hold all these factions behind you that are loyal to you, so you hold the power. And it's like, it was great to see these women, as you said, that tangibly, I mean, obviously Zedra's a powerful sorceress, but I mean, tangibly, outwardly to everybody else, what is their power, right? They've built their power, their influence base up like this, the point where everybody's looking to them as the leaders. But really and truly, when you go back to the beginning of the book, what did they have, right? Not a lot. So they jockeyed their position and influenced themselves, so they got to this point, whether it's by eliminating enemies, whether it's by gaining influence and gaining allies. They get to this point where now everybody's like, okay, hey, Zedra, what are we doing? Sir, what are we doing? And that was the pyramid of which they built their power, was very interesting in a patriarchal society for two women who normally would not wield that kind of power. And I thought that was amazing, because I love amazing female characters. That's what I really, really, really sucked me into this book, because when you give me two female characters that are just dominating the action, I eat it up, right? So I love that about this book.
Yeah, and they weren't. Oh, sorry.
Oh, please.
They weren't like your stereotypical female characters either. Like, they were so out of the box and just so well written. It was awesome. And like, I loved it. They were also like, as they were building themselves up, like, they're also like, it even mentions in the book how whatever one does in desperation, the other one does something more desperate to like combat it, and they're just constantly trying to one up each other. And I thought that was so cool as well. And just, that's what would happen. And them trying to one up each other every single time was just a chaotic mess, and got them to where they all ended up. It was just so good.
Yeah, I think making both characters women and putting them in this very patriarchal setting, for me, I did this because I wanted to explore how, in the Middle East in particular, women in these kind of settings came into power and actually took the reins of power. And when I would read history, it would just amaze me how they were able to do this despite the overwhelming, patriarchal nature of the system. And power actually is a very, very simple thing. It's you go and you talk to someone, you become friends with them, you get their influence, you make a promise to them, you owe something to them, they owe something to you. It's just forming relationships. So Syra and Zedra are going around and actually doing this, and naturally they're going to accumulate power, and it doesn't matter that they're women. And they're not just going around and doing this, they're doing it pretty competently, and they're doing it with a objective in mind, and with a goal in mind. And a lot of the men are not doing this. For example, you could say like Hadrith, he does do this to an extent, but his goal is just to get richer, and just to increase his own wealth, whereas his goal is not necessarily to become powerful and to, in that sense. So, and you do see Kiar is also kind of building this influence, but he's kind of undone by his own blind spots. So a lot of things, when you have people accumulating power within a system, and they're competing with each other, and they're even competing with their own allies in the system, and everyone, all the characters, basically Kato, Kizar, they're all in the system, and they're all trying to accumulate power, and they're all making alliances and then changing those alliances, and everyone is just jostling for power to see who will come out on top. And for me, it was just, given that this is a very patriarchal system, it was just fascinating to put a woman into it. And her objective isn't necessarily to just destroy the system, it's to rise to the top of it, and then once she's at the top, to remake it however she wants to remake it. So for me, that story was very interesting to tell, and it's based on, I got a lot of inspiration from history. If you read Middle Eastern history in particular, there's a lot of women who do this, and they do this, it's pretty amazing to read about it. So yeah, that was that was one of the things that I enjoyed most about writing this story.
I kind of have two questions. They're separate, but I have to get them both in because I have to. So when Sadie showed up, I was like, oh my god. I was like, wow. I was like, okay, so this is game changer, obviously, right? So and her role was very unique in the book, in this book, compared to the other book. And she was someone who was able to see both sides, because even though she was kind of on one side, she still had a very macro view in some ways of things. And so the kind of my first question is, what made you bring her back, right? And then second of all, I have to quickly, just bear with me, I have to quickly read. There are so many amazing lines in this book, right? So many lines that kept going back. It's like, oh my God, this is just great writing. This is just something that's going to stay with me. But this, I have to read this, okay? Did she want me to say sorry? Sorry, destroyed your life, maimed you, killed a man you treasured, and got your brother killed. I wished I'd never done it, but I couldn't hold that remorse. True remorse requires repentance, and true repentance requires justice. And if I were to face justice, then who would protect my son? And when I read that passage, I had to stop and go, okay, just like, wow, right? And what is your concept of justice? Like, I want to know what Zamil Akhtar thinks about that passage and justice. So, okay, I'll shut up now. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I see this in a lot of stories where you do have redemption arcs, where a character will do some really terrible things, and then that is kind of weighed against the good things that they do later. But doing good things to cover up bad things isn't necessarily justice. So in Zedra's mind, justice would be for her to confess her crimes and to be punished for those crimes. However the law decides, or however whatever the religion instructs, and to actually face a reckoning for those crimes, and not just to get away. And so that might be okay because she's remorseful, but then she has to think of her son. So it's more complicated than that. It's not just yeah, I'm ready to sacrifice myself for justice now. I've awakened to the truth. No, you have this little baby who, if she dies, what's going to happen to this little baby? Who's going to take care of him? People are going to, since he's the son of the Shah, people are literally going to be tearing him up, and who knows what would happen to him. So she's the only one there who genuinely wants his best, and just has that pure love for him. So it's not just about her, and it's just not a simple thing. And in the real world, justice is not a simple thing. It's just messy. It's very messy, and sometimes for someone to face justice, it could cause much worse things to happen as a result. So a lot of the reason I write these books is to show that things are not simple, and happily ever after, and this simple idea of justice, and the simple idea of who should rightfully be the ruler, and who's on the good side. These things are just not simple, and that's just the whole driving force of the book, and of all these themes.
That theme is in it quite a couple of times, because then there's also, because after Tamaz, the succession was supposed to be that it goes to his brother, but then it does state in there that the what's the city called again? I can't say it.
Kandbajar.
Kandbajar isn't for an old man. An old man isn't supposed to rule it at where it is right now. So it just didn't make sense. And it was it's not as simple, and it's not as black and white as you're next in line for succession. It is not that simple. And so I was just yes, because in most fantasies, that's what it is. It's the king's dead, so then it goes to his heir, or whoever the son is. And then there's the power grab for that. But I loved that it was in this book, in this series, it is never that simple. It's never black and white, and there's layers upon layers. It's like a cake, a really big cake.
Yeah, because your title just doesn't matter. If what really matters in these kind of systems is if you have the influence and have the allegiance to actually take power. So it doesn't matter who Tamaz designated as his heir. That person will have a slight advantage, but it's very slight. And so at the end of the day, when a throne is empty, it's empty. And the person who's going to claim that throne is the one with the most influence, is the one with the most backing from the army, from the people with actual weapons, whoever they are. And you just see this in history, throughout history, that when a king dies, succession is usually very, very messy. And it's very difficult for that king to prepare the succession. He definitely wanted his son to take power, but it's very difficult for him to actually make that happen, because once he's gone, all the influence and power that he wielded isn't going to just automatically transfer to his son or to whoever he deemed his heir. So I did want to show that, and I just wanted to show that what doesn't matter whether you're like from this 1,000-year-old dynasty, or whether you're the crown prince, or whatever your title is. You still have to claim power, and if you have someone else who's trying to claim it, you're still going to have to deal with that person. And just because you have the title doesn't mean you're necessarily the best ruler either. So it's all very, very messy, and I wanted to show how messy it is, and just show it all in its true colors. So that was, something I personally am very interested in, because I read a lot of history, and I don't see a lot of books. I think George R. R. Martin is the one that did it tremendously well, and obviously being influenced by him, I wanted to do it, but in a Middle Eastern context. And the Middle Eastern context is quite different, because you don't really have nobility. You don't have these lords. It's not about lords. You do have nobility, but it's not about landowners fighting with each other. Instead, you have these nomadic factions, and you have these armies of slave soldiers. The Middle East is very famous for having these janissaries and all kinds of other slave soldiers. So you have these forces fighting for the throne, and I think that is kind of what sets it apart from Game of Thrones and gives it its own flavor.
It's funny what in that vein, so much of what I saw was about the perception of power, or the perception of what people were. Like, everybody keeps saying, "Oh, Cars is so great," right? Now, behind the scenes, we're seeing what he's more like. And I remember when seeing him at first, before, he seems very competent, right? So, and I think that's how you set him up prior to Conqueror's Blood, that he was this competent, he seemed pretty competent, right? And he seemed very noble, and he seemed very, now you peek behind the curtain, you see, okay, he's a bit perverse and all these things. And you're hearing these from other characters like the Zedras and all this. And there's this point in the book where Zedra's like, everybody thinks this guy's so great, but really, he's not all that, right? And that was so much of the book, that so much of it had to do with reputation, right? And but it was almost like a mirage, because we see his flaws when we get to see more of him, and he's built up like this. Cars is coming, you know what I mean? Cars is coming, he's coming to take back what's rightfully his. He's competent, he's good, and he's gonna be fair, he's gonna be a great king, and blah blah. But we see his flaws, and we see, not as much, because he's kind of in the background for so much of the story. And then when he finally shows up, kind of like the way Zedra intimates, he's not quite as impressive as people think, right? And what I loved about that was that, again, we have this thing about, we talked about in the last podcast when we did Gunmetal Gods, is like, so much is about reputation and what people think you are, okay, what was Henry the Fifth really like? People, lionize him as this great, what was Constantine really like? People like, oh my God, well, Genghis Khan was so horrible. Well, what was he really like? What were these people really like? And what I love the way you let us peek behind the curtain. You introduce someone and they seem to be this, and then you let us peek behind the curtain. It's like, oh no, they're not really like that. And so I love that in taking these big historical figures, like, you can see how in the years to come, someone like Cars would be this big historical figure, but now we get to see and just, it was just so funny the way Zedra's kind of like, he's not all that, right? You know what I mean? Like that everybody likes him, but why? Like, he's not, so I love that aspect of the book.
Did I do it? Did I make it?
Hello.
Hi.
Stupid.
In my defense, it's a little after 9 here, so I ran. Hi. I'm so sorry. I can't do math. I'm a booktuber. I don't know how math works. So
we all had this problem today because of the daylight saving.
We're just happy you can make it. So.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I know we're in spoilers now, and I missed good stuff. I'll watch it later, but let me just continue your conversation. I'll jump in. But I have my physical books that I didn't have last time. Hey, how much do you love me, husband?
A little bit, but
Not that bag, the other bag. They're right there. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm a fly on the wall. Continue before I interrupted.
Happy birthday to him, by the way. While we
thank you.
happy birthday,
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, me.
happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
March
Thank
birthdays.
you.
March people are always great. March birthday, March. Good month.
It's good.
3月の誕生日は
Good month.
一番いいって。
Really?
Good month.
It's,
Yeah.
it's bad in Japan.
嘘本当
Oh,
Oh,
really?
Yeah,
Oh.
because New Year start from the April in Japan.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
like it's late.
He's a late baby.
Ah,
Yeah,
late
late baby, but smart.
It's
so
the
fine.
December. It's like our December. I am a December
Ah.
baby. I know those feelings.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, I still think it's
good.
good. And happy birthday. Hope you had a good
Thank
time.
you.
Yep. You. So my bad. But I have the books that I didn't have last time. So this is my bragging here, because I'm sure everyone did it in the beginning, but I'm so happy to have them physically. But like I said, I'm a fly on the wall. What were we talking about before I interrupted so rudely? What was it?
we were talking about Kiars.
Okay.
So I'll answer. I'll answer Stuart's point. So like you said, Kiars has a very built-up reputation, and within these kind of monarchies, you would obviously try to set up your heir as being this great person. You would tell everyone that he's a magnanimous and noble man, and he's competent and wise and smart, and just like people watch Fox News all day, they'll believe what you tell them, right? So he's set up in this to be this amazing person, and Zedra, being an outsider, having just come in, she's not blinded by all this pomp. In fact, she is more biased against it because she wants to change this whole system. So she sees him for what he really is. And yeah, she kind of acknowledges, he's not an idiot. He's not a caricature, basically. He's not like a complete fool. He's not a total idiot. He's not, but he's, from her perspective, he's not the smartest, shrewdest, most competent person. He's got a lot of weaknesses. She herself is one of his weaknesses, and she exploits that how she can. So she sees his true colors. She sees him for what he really is. And this allows her to undermine him in a way that other people are not able to. And this, and like you said, this is it's all part of the smoke and mirrors that I'm sure Kiars and the Seleucals and the royal family were trying to play to set him up as the heir and to set him up as being unchallenged, but it didn't quite work out.
Yeah, I particularly, like, I think I mentioned in my review, maybe we've talked about this, but like the new perspectives in this book, these two when we're in spoiler territory, right? So the two women that we follow, I'm not going to say I enjoyed them as characters, but I enjoyed what they did as characters, if that makes sense. So I didn't necessarily become connected to them, but I loved the way that they could see through things that other people could not, right? So just what you mentioned there, the idea of cutting through like the bullshit kind of in a way of what is expected by those who are in the system already. I really enjoyed the fresh view that we got, from our perspective. So just hearing you say that confirms something I really enjoyed about this perspective. So
yeah, I think the fun for me was just also because Gunmetal Gods, you had two warriors and two fighting men and two generals opposing each other. Here, I wanted to show a different side to a conflict and a different side to a war, and I wanted it to be, of course, focused on, more on not the people actually fighting the war, but the people who have basically the greatest stake in that war, or the people who are causing the war or causing the conflict. So it was a different focus in that sense.
100%. And I could be projecting feelings here, but for me, it felt like maybe because the two new perspectives were women and the first two perspectives were men, maybe for me, I read into it in a certain way. But the idea that women are boxed out of power in a way, and yet they're the ones who seem to suffer from it. Not that men didn't suffer in this book, because they sure as hell did, but having the perspective of women and the struggle to get hold of power, other people seem to inherit, and yet they're the ones that seem to suffer the most. And maybe that's why they want it in the first place. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into that and it's just a perspective change, but I really enjoyed that as well.
That was definitely a big part of it. We were talking about this earlier, but
my apologies.
I
figured you would have. It's been a while, so I figure you guys have covered this by now, but I just wanted to share.
But for Syra and Zedra, they kind of have, for them in this system, they have the most to lose, like you said. If things go badly, Zedra for sure has the most to lose, because her son would be at stake, and Syra as well. She's been shuttled around from here to there, and she just wants a place to call home, basically. So she has a lot to lose as well. So that's sort of why it doesn't matter that there are these women in this patriarchal system. They will do what they have to do to get power, and they won't be limited by that system. They'll work within it and find a way to gain power.
I then those are some excellent points by Taylor. I can't help it. I'm going back to this love thing, because me, I'm this hopeless romantic, but it's also tied into one of the themes I think exploring. So sorry, I'm backtracking here, so forgive me. Bear with me. So poetry.
I'm here for it. I wonder why. But I'm here for it.
Poetry, the language of love, and Laughter Square. Like I can see Laughter Square. Okay, I can see it. I can visualize it. You make me feel like the reader feel like you're walking through it. And Emmy, the dance he does, which was so cool at first with Sira, as they're getting to know each other, and he initially starts up, trying to cut her down, like I said, and almost insult her appearance, that she's not voluptuous, and blah blah. But really, he's attracted to her, I assume secretly, and he's already forming those feelings. And as time goes on, obviously they fall in love, only to have the ending to, well, at least ending for now, to their relationship that was just so like heart-wrenching, right? That scene when he locks himself away and won't accept her. But in that, Emmy's one of those guys that he hasn't totally come to acknowledge his crimes and his wrongs fully. And obviously there's reasons for that, which you portray, but that almost seems like a barrier as well to their relationship, that he is not admitting what he's done, some of the horrors that he's done. And although now he turns against her for the horrors that he perceives that she's done, he hasn't fully admitted some of the things that he's done that have been horrible. And I wondered if that was one of the reasons why you ultimately ripped them apart. It was just so like, it seemed like they'd finally found each other. I thought maybe he was going to die. He survives. You figure, okay, there's no barrier now for them being together. And then, and of course, again, she winds up with Pashang, and that's a more pragmatic and politically advantageous position for her. But at the same time, she loves Emmy, but he rejects her because of all the things he feels that she's done. But he hasn't acknowledged the things that he's done, really. So I just wondered why you chose to do that. It was fantastic, heart-wrenching, but
my anger was when he was like, no, I was like, excuse me, sir. Like, did I read the same book? Because excuse me, like that was the level I was at. So.
Yeah, it was awesome. He spent the whole book falling in love with her, and then boom, like nope. And it's like, and she's
who tortured a woman and then had to face her, like, excuse me. I assume that was on purpose, but it got the desired reaction out of me for sure. I was not happy.
Me too. I was like, oh my God. It's like, no, wow.
Same. I was just trying to find it, but I've got like exclamation points on it.
Just like 15 of them, right?
I think for Eshe, the thing is, he probably knows he's aware of his guilt and of what he's done. And the thing is, he doesn't want to be with someone who reminds him of that and who's kind of a reflection of that because of her own actions. He wanted to be with someone who was good and who was pure and who was not guilty of these heinous things. And outwardly, he might have this indignation, but ultimately, him as a character, it was more about finding someone who would heal him and who would not make his worst sensibilities even worse. And he kind of has this role in the story where he is trying to redeem himself, and he is trying to do something good. He doesn't want to just sit around and let bad things happen around him, especially when he has this power. And he sees Syra as being on the good side and as, fighting for something that's worthwhile, because he kind of sees, and he himself, the way he perceives things, it's quite distorted because he sees his enemy being Ashir and the things that she represents, Ashir from book 1 and the Blood Star and all these arcane cosmic horror things. He sees these things as his enemy, and he projects that upon Zedra, and he sees Syra as being on the side of good as opposing that. And this kind of becomes his worldview. But in the end, when he sees what Syra did, he realizes that he had it completely wrong. He had it completely upside down. And that the whole time he was aiding what he wanted to be fighting. And for him, it was just too painful to accept. And, he's a character which I really enjoyed writing. And in book 3, we'll definitely see more of him. So, yeah, I think it was kind of a very nuanced thing. And I sort of wish we could have had a chapter from his perspective, just to see how he perceives the world and how it's become quite distorted and how he himself is really seeking redemption. And instead of getting that redemption, he gets the complete opposite of it. So that's sort of why at the end, when he finally sees the stark truth, it's just too much for him. And he projects all this hatred on Syra, all this anger on Syra, and just turns his back from her. And now he's kind of on this new path where he thinks maybe I can stop the blood plague from, destroying the kingdom the way it destroyed his homeland. And if he can do this now, maybe he can finally redeem himself. So that's kind of where he's set up for book 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Will we be seeing more of what is her name? I was trying to look for it before. The girl that Eshe tortured. Will she be in book 3 as well?
Yeah.
Excellent. And
yeah, that's excellent. Like, you got to do the hand thing, at the same time.
See, the thing about Conqueror's Blood is I didn't write it the way I wrote Gunmetal Gods. I didn't write it as for the story to conclude all the threads. So I left a lot of threads and characters purposefully for book 3. So the character that you mentioned, I forgot her name as well, but the girl who Eshe tortured, she will be in book 3, and she's also someone who I want to explore more of. If anyone remembers her name, please say it. Because
Hold on, I let me do my flex. I got my physical book. Hold on.
It's like R-I, I think there's an H in there. Like trying to
Rui,
look for
There's
it.
an
Rui.
H in there.
Rui.
Rui.
You know,
Rui.
the thing is, I
Rui.
changed her name. I changed her name so many times when I was writing the book.
I have too many tabs. At this point, it's not helpful. Like, I don't know where to go. You don't have this many. Like,
You have to
Steve-
color code it like Lana.
Yeah. Oh,
I
you
did,
didn't.
it's color coded, but by emotion, so it's not helpful.
Yeah, Steve's gonna disown me because I have the pages folded for now. I promise, Steve, I do unfold them. I really do. I don't keep them.
The
that way.
mark
It's
is
just-
there. I
Yeah.
have been upset. Are we in the midst of a doggy year? Oh no. Let's see. How did she make me feel? She made me feel upset. So orange is where we're going with. Oh no.
I'm so excited that she's going to be like explored more in book 3.
So, you know, can I if you say no, it's also fine, but like I wanted more of Kin. Are we gonna get him later? Like he had a cameo, and like I think I put 3 tabs on one page when he had a cameo. Like I was so excited. Is his are his glory days over? Just give me what I should expect.
Well, book 3 will be written from Kiva and Syra's points of view, so there will
There's
be more
my
time.
answer. Yay!
Excellent.
When I was writing this book, I was trying to work him in more, but it didn't really work. So
It is what it is, right?
it is what it is, yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
he'll be back quite a bit in book 3.
I love at the back of the book. We've got.
Oh yeah.
They're not helpful.
That's
Oh,
my
that's
my
awesome.
call for people to review. Threaten them with
Steal your
threaten their
shoe.
shoes.
That was awesome. You know, I did even comment that, you know, although in some ways the physical manifestation of the gods in some ways was more horrific in Gunmetal Gods, the actuality of the gods when they showed up in Conqueror's Blood was just, oh my god, like wow, holy moly, and like Marmot.
I figured you guys had already talked about it, so I didn't want to make you talk about it again. But the end of this book, when he started separating into like 15 different pieces with like his bones breaking, I was like, this is what I'm here for. This is it. Like, yes.
Yeah, completely badass. Completely like,
Yeah.
and Taylor, before you came, I was saying like, is Lat dead? Is she dead? And he won't give it up, obviously. But yeah, that climactic like gods come out of the sky to do battle, like, whoo, wow, that was, yeah.
I mean, how dare you not give it up? How dare you? But I don't know. I mean, this might be outreaching. It's totally fine if it is. But I also did read the novella Death Rider, so I know it's a prequel, and you know, and we don't have to talk about it here if others haven't read it. But I do just want to say, well, I have a moment, you know, with the author himself this way, with the author himself. But the gods in that book, so fucking weird, and I loved it. More of that, please. Like, it was so weird. It was so Lovecraftian, but like my brain exploded. Like, I loved it. So I don't know if we're gonna do another meeting just for the novella. So I wanted to make sure I got that out there, you know, while I'm here. But I ate that up in like 2 hours, less than 2 hours. So yeah. So
I think
so weird. It was amazing.
For me, the fun of these books is to explore some crazy cosmic horror idea, and they're so, you know, if you read Lovecraft and other Jinjo Ito and other, maybe you're familiar with Jinjo Ito.
Yep. He likes
yeah,
his spirals. Yep, I know him.
Yeah.
Sure.
So when you read these cosmic horror authors, you know, the ideas are basically endless with how you can inject cosmic horror into a story. And, you know, I think going forward, I want to make the cosmic horror a lot more intimate, in the sense that I want it not just to be about these humongous gods while they will still, you know, be there. I want it to be more of like almost a mundane sense of cosmic horror. So that's sort of a hint I'll give you for book 3, where the cosmic horror is going to really seep into the story in a way where it wasn't present in book 1 and book 2. And maybe the novella kind of hints at that, where there's this all-pervading cosmic horror that's going on, and there are hints of it, like in the character Daria obviously sees hints of these things before she's aware of it. So that's kind of the direction I want to go in, where the cosmic horror is there and it's just like a persistent menace in the back of your head. You know, it's just this persistent sense of discomfort. It doesn't just appear all of a sudden. So that's kind of where I want to take these stories.
I mean, obviously not to speak over the person who created them, but I would argue that's in Conqueror's blood. Like the personal aspect of it, like it felt a lot closer. It didn't feel like it was in the stars in this book. So I think, you know, I would argue that that is already there, you know, so.
Yeah, it'll probably be even more in the next one. But I think, you know, that's
I'm like internally squealing right now.
Yeah, me too. I'm like,
don't do it internally, let it out, you know.
Yeah, I mean, just brilliant. Yeah, and I mean, although you know, obviously I've read both Ito and Lovecraft, although I have some issues with Lovecraft, but that's, you know, separate to, you know,
understandably
think, you know,
so.
Understandably, what you know, of course, but at the same time, part of your brilliance, Zamil, is so if anybody's read Madeline Miller, she wrote Circe's Song of Achilles. I remember Taylor was saying, yeah, you're gonna love that book, and like, yeah, and I already read Circe. So she brings the gods to life in a way that still makes them incredibly daunting and scary, but human. And that's what you have a gift of doing, Zamil, that you keep the gods, they're still deified, they're still scary, they're still larger than life, but they're human. Horrible in the case of Conqueror's Blood, but very human. And you give them these very human attributes that make them not relatable, but was understandable perhaps, and make them they become this construct that you can see a little bit what their motivations are. You kind of understand they're capricious, and I love the concept of capricious gods that are just callous and just wreaking havoc and just humans and their pawns. That's a theme I really love. But what you do so well is you attribute these motivations and these, you know, and I mean, you make us, like when Marmot is scared, like, ooh, there's some real badasses that you really don't want to draw attention to, that I'm kind of trying to, like, that scared me, right? So, you know, like I said, you have a gift for doing that. So
all those horror movies and horror books I read are paying off in fantasy in the most an unlikely genre, but I guess that's the fun of mashing the two genres up. You can do all these things.
Yeah, I mean, like I know Steve is much more, I keep pointing the wrong way. Steve is much more versed in this, but like I'm new to the horror genre. So I got into it like the past year or so, and I'm still trying to find what I like. So I'm like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, I dig this, I don't dig this. And so I guess the reason I brought up the novella is because that was one of the first moments where it's a short novella. So even though the horror is present in these two, like it was so short that it was so much in my face, where I was like, wait, this is more horror than fantasy. Like it is both, and so I I really appreciate, like, it's helped me learn what I enjoy, you know, in horror as well, because I hadn't found that yet, you know, and I had actually had discussions with Steve before about like, what should I pick up and stuff. So, you know, I think bridging two genres can be really helpful for readers of one particular genre, you know, to kind of have a segue into another. Because I had a feeling I would like it, I just didn't know what I liked, and so I think I'm starting to find that, you know, through this. So I really appreciate that.
And
So-
cosmic horror is like a tough balancing act, because you do have to keep the cosmic and the gods somewhat mysterious, but you also have to relate it to human beings and make it relevant for human beings. So you have this sort of the space where you can create the horror. But it's like with a horror movie, when you see the monster like in the first 5 minutes and it's this CGI creation, all your fear leaves your mind, right? So one of the best horror movies I've ever seen actually is called Langoliers. It's a Stephen King adaptation. Maybe some of you have read the book, but they keep the horror going for like 2-3 hours, and it's so incredibly, there's so much dread that they build up. But then once you see the actual monster appear, it's done in this 80s style CGI, so it's completely cheesy. And then all the fear just drains out of you. So this is the real challenge with horror and with cosmic horror. I think Lana was going to comment.
Yeah, take it away.
I think I was just going to say that I agree with you, Taylor, with the mashup of fantasy and horror. Like, that's my new favorite genre. Like, the mashing of the two. Because in fantasy, for me, I can get really tired of really quickly because it's just too fluffy. And then you've got, like, the grim dark, like the grim dark, which is, like, can get really dark. And so it's, like, sometimes it's a slog to get through when there's not when it's more like grim dark than fantasy, like the setting's fantasy, but other than that it's just grim. And then with like with Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood, it just mixes the two so beautifully. And so after reading Gunmetal Gods, I've like tried to look for fantasy grimdark horror mashings, and everything that I've read, I'm like, yes, this is my new favorite genre.
Can you guys hear that? No, is it just Mr. Someone's snoring. Hold on. Continue, please. I'm so sorry.
Good morning.
I totally agree, and I think, and Steve, of course, is the horror expert, but yeah, in Conqueror's Blood, you had the cosmic horror, but then what Zamil did specifically with Zedra and the possession aspect, the soul stealing, body inhabiting, aspect of this, kind of like undead, soul that's through different generations keeps taking over different people's bodies and inhabiting them, and can use blood to get into people's bodies, spontaneously, and then go into animals. And I think that in itself is also a big part of the horror of because with Zedra, you don't know at any time what she's going to do, and when she commits that first act, when she gets into Sierra and uses her to kill Tamaz and then wreak all the destruction that really kicks everything off, that's horror, right? That's like, because when she said the chapter before, when she says, well, I got to do what I got to do now, it's like, what the hell is she gonna do? Like, I know I was like, what's she gonna do? And then when she did it, it was like, holy moly. So, and that feeling continues through the book, because once that was established, you don't know what she's gonna do next, and that itself is scary, because she can inhabit anybody. So I think there is also that micro horror level in the book not the cosmic, the big god cosmic horror, but there's a micro, almost like witchcraft possession that I found was really, really well done and was horrific and scary, right? So
Yeah, I think Zedra was the perfect character for that, because she herself in her attitude is sort of like she's seen all the horrors you can imagine. And so she's, I guess, ready to inflict horrors now on other people, and, you know, do it in this way that is, I guess, surprising, and, you know, for those people who are the victims of it, completely impossible to protect yourself from, because no one really knows that she's there causing all this chaos. So, going forward, I think that's kind of the way I want to create conflict. Whereas in Gunmetal Gods, it was more about these two big armies fighting each other, and the war itself was kind of the horror. Here, the horror was more of like a menacing kind of horror that, like you're describing. So that's definitely something I want to explore more of and get into more of, because like you're all saying, I'm all about this horror fantasy mashup now. And I think Gunmetal Gods wasn't even meant to be that in the beginning. It just sort of went that way when I was writing it. But with Conqueror's Blood, I fully kind of embraced it. And now I want to explore it like even more.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily horror aspect, and maybe you guys talked about this while I wasn't here, but the idea of like Zedra's, her experiences weren't her own, but that didn't change her as a character. Like the fact that it was a mental state, and yet when it was revealed to her, she was like, yeah, I don't care. I'm still gonna do what I wanted to do. Like, it is what it is, And so I really liked the internal aspect of that, where like external forces made her who she is, and yet that those experiences, those memories, those things didn't change her actions and what she wanted to do. Even after that reveal happened, she, like part of me expected for her to kind of hear it and be like, okay, well, I'm going to switch sides now. But she was like, that's cool. All right. And she just kind of was like, I'm still going to do what I wanted to do. And like, I think just the embodiment of like that, the mental aspect of this book also really matches where I think you just said you were going to go. It's kind of where I'm getting at here, where it was like this, the horror happens within the heads of people as well, is kind of what I'm getting for. So like, we didn't have to see it happen to her. We just felt her memories. We felt her talk about it. And that was enough for her character to have the motivations that she did. Right. So I do think there's still a little bit of that, like the war is the horror aspect, but it's within the minds of people now. Like we didn't have to see it in real time. So I really did enjoy that too, because I think it really matches where you said you were going, with it. So.
Yeah, I like to have war as a backdrop, and I like to have it as like a context for the story. I even did this in the novella, because I think you can explore a lot of things within that context. It's something that is present in our everyday lives. There's war going on all over the world. So, the horrors, when you're writing, about war, you also have to focus on the horrors that people do to each other, and just the little things that, or not the little things, but the normal things that happen in the course of a war, and the normal atrocities that people commit against each other when you have this cycle of violence. So that kind of is always there in the novella as well. In all three books, that's there present as a theme. And then on top of that, you layer in things that are just, I try to layer in things that create even more of a sense of dread. And some of it is inspired by the real world. Like in the world that we live in today, you could have a war going on, and that war is really bad in and of itself. But then you'll have other countries selling weapons to both sides in that war and fueling the war and making it 100 times worse, and selling like chemical weapons. And just on the news they were talking about Russia might use chemical weapons in Ukraine, and
I was
chemical
gonna say
weapons are
that's so topical.
yeah, and it's
Almost,
chemical
yeah.
weapons are like cosmic horror to me. Just thinking about it, you could just be sitting in your house and all of a sudden you can't breathe, and that's absolutely horrifying. The things we have in the real world are, the fact that we create bombs from atoms. To me, that's cosmic horror as well. The fact that these things exist are very much cosmic horror to me. So in writing these books and contextualizing them with war, I try to make the cosmic horror play that role, in the sense that the things that we can do to each other with these mighty powers, like Syra has this power where she can just do this and literally move stars around in the sky and cause things to happen that she herself doesn't understand. And the power is in her hands, and it's absolutely destructive. And that's very similar to like someone playing with a drone, someone operating a drone on their screen and just pressing a button and blowing up a whole town. To me, these things are the magic, the horrifying magic in these books sort of does reflect reality and what human beings are capable of, because we've kind of claimed this power that before would have been magic. It would have seemed like pure magic to people that we can do these things. So I think that's a big motivating factor for me when writing these books.
And yet, with all the horror and mixed in with that, and what I loved about your writing is that there are those really funny moments. And like, one of my favorite scenes is when, Zedra's in possession of the rat, and then the rats, and then the unit comes in, and finally he's been waiting all this time hiding, and he comes with a broom and kills the rat. And it's like, yes, and like the rat's dead, twitching there, etc. And because we know as a reader, etc., like that was hilarious, right? and there were so many, and just the humor with the banter of the poets, and their, who can cut up someone else the most and cut them down the best, and like there was still a lot of really great humorous moments in that, right? And even when one of my favorites, and I told you Murad was my favorite characters, when they show when they're talking about Murad was just this badass fighter, and that he comes out as a young guy to challenge to a duel, and he comes out, he cuts the guy in a few seconds, but then he just goes back and I'm done. I showed what I can do, and we were like Murad, like that was, yeah. There were some great moments of humor too, and lightheartedness. Maybe not necessarily lighthearted humor, but humor for sure. Dark humor, but very funny moments that were, because that's part of life too, right? Humor is a big part of life, the same way the horrific aspects are. So I thought that was really well done, the way you wove those, so that I had a few laughs too reading this book, which is always great. So
yeah, that's probably why Kin was so effective in book one, because Kin just came in toward the middle end part and just started, he was just funny, just straight up funny, all the time. And I guess with Conqueror's Blood, we didn't have that, but I still tried to keep things, especially between Syra and Eshe, I tried to keep things, their tone somewhat light and somewhat, have that banter, and have some reprieve from all the heavy themes that are in the story. Because when you're reading, these kind of stories, it can, just as a reader, it can become overwhelming, and people will always find a way to laugh, and a way to even in the bleakest of situations, people will find things to laugh about. Even people sitting people in the bomb shelter right now in Ukraine. I'm sure they're finding things to laugh about with each other. That's just how people are, you know. So you have to have. It's just part of human nature, and you know, I want these books to reflect that, and to also just be entertaining and be, you know, at times have that lighthearted feel when appropriate.
No, it's a realistic coping mechanism. So that's all. Go ahead, Lana.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, where did you get Sarah's mother's like sayings from? Like, I just took that Pashang is as cruel as a broken slipper. I was like, what?
That was awesome. The poetry and the sayings and the witticisms and it's like that was awesome. Like so yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from sort of in the Middle East and in South Asia. You know, a lot of that comes from sort of the stuff that we say to each other, like the slipper thing. You know, I don't know who thought of this, but growing up in Urdu we call it a chappal. So growing up, this slipper is just this thing which you know, maybe your mother will use it to like hit you, or maybe you'll throw it at someone. So it's just something that's in the culture, you know. So I just sort of, you know, it's just, I try to put these cultural aspects into the story, and a lot of that is injected into the poetry and into the humor, and just into maybe like the spices that they use in their cooking or the foods, and you know, the sayings that they might have. You know, these things probably you wouldn't hear them in like a fantasy novel set in like a more Western setting. So I think that's a lot of it is just me injecting the culture that I grew up with into these stories, and you know, I think that's definitely something that makes them unique.
It was awesome, and I got it right away because West Indian culture, same thing. You know, someone's gonna, someone's gonna throw.
Can I mention?
Yeah.
Yo, how funny this is to me, because like in Japanese culture, slippers are what you wear in someone's house to show respect. So for me, I was like, wait, broken slipper. Okay, so like you're walking barefoot in someone's house and you're disrespecting people. Like I just loved, and so I had to separate myself from my perspective of what a broken slipper might mean, you know, like from my life experience. And I loved that so much. I'm so glad that Lana brought that up. God damn it, this way. I'm so glad that Lana brought that up, because like that stuck out to me, because I loved how uniquely cultural that was, right? Because I could tell from my culture, or the culture that I'm involved in at least now, like the slipper doesn't mean the same thing, you know? So I just really appreciated that, because I had to pull myself out, you know, when I was reading, be like, wait a minute, I don't think that's what this means, you know? So I really like that.
Yeah, and see, I liked it for the opposite reason, because like in Polynesian culture, like when you get lippy or disrespect like your mum or one of the aunties, we call it a jandal, but same thing. Like it's like it just comes off the foot, and then comes flying at your head.
Yep.
Like you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah. And I saw the same West Indian culture, same thing. You know what I mean? You're gonna get a slipper, you get whatever they can grab, right, to throw at you.
Just
but then
flying through the air at that point.
yeah. But then also in the clever play on that concept, in that a broken slipper, well, it's a complete irritant, right? The fact that, okay, you're walking, you're going to say you're going to a fancy dinner, Taylor without, so say you're wearing heels, Taylor, and you go out and, oh my gosh, I got a broken heel. It's the most, it can just wreck your whole night having a broken heel. And a broken slipper is one of those things. You're walking the market, it's like, oh man, this is pain. And now it was just such a clever point for me, play on words that you use that particular example. I knew it was more cultural or colloquial, but yeah, it was just awesome. That's in my head now. Like so many things in your book, they're just in here now. Like I'm never gonna get that vision of Lat being squished and bursting out of my head ever. That's in literature. Like I have those, we all have these little data banks of scenes from books or movies in our heads throughout our lives that we've watched, and that one is going to be it's filed in back here now, right? And same thing with the slipper. It's going to stick. So.
I hope it doesn't keep you up at night.
No, it's good stuff. Hey, look, if you ever read the stuff I write, don't believe me, man. No, it's all great stuff. It's great. No, it's awesome.
Just a nightmare of a slipper, possessed slipper, you know.
Hey, that's an idea for book 3. Possessed slipper. I like that.
I better see it.
Taylor wants some credit. She wants some acknowledgement down the back, you know.
Yeah, you
and
know.
to Taylor, the
slipper
slipper
that
idea.
dies in the dream's got to be named Taylor or something, you know.
So, Zamil, no pressure, but when can we be expecting book 3? Taylor, grubby hands on it.
It's definitely my next project after I wrap up what I'm currently writing. So I will start on it most likely in May. And I hope if things go well, typically it takes me 6 to 8 months from when I start writing to when I'm ready to publish the book. So my hope is early next year, it will be available. That is my hope, and I'm raring to get started on it. Like I have so many ideas and just, but I'm glad I took a break from Gunmetal Gods and to start a new series, because it's kind of refreshed my whole enthusiasm for it. Because I think when you're stuck in one series and you're just writing that one, and especially when it's something as heavy as Gunmetal Gods, it gets a little daunting. So right now I'm like raring to go and get started on it.
Question: are we going to see Akhtar again?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I think I said in the last one, I was just like, or I at least said it in my review, I was like, can we please have more of him? And then he was like a little cameo in this one, and I was just like, oh, is there going to be more?
Yeah, he will definitely play a bigger part in the third book than he did in the second. And like I mentioned, Syra and Kiva will be the 2 point of view characters. So you know, I don't want to say anything, but you might see some other old faces as well in the book. Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy I'm happy you had a break and you're refreshed and that, it's helped you revere. But I'm sorry, it's unacceptable that I have to wait until then to get book 3. I'm sorry. I'm just this is totally unacceptable. So I guess in that
Excuse me, it's March, so
so I'm totally pissed. But anyways, that's okay. I'll get over it. But so now I believe, I'm not sure if Lana and Steve Taylor's read the novella. So I guess we'll have to reconvene. Well, the rest of us have to read the novella, and then we'll have to have a chat in between to keep us going between your book 3. We'll have to all get back together and discuss your novella, because it's just too long. Like I can't take that. I can't wait that long. Like I got to read something else by you. So
I'm in, and I will be on time. I promise. As long as it's not the day that daylight saving starts everywhere else.
Oh man,
I will be here on time.
Yeah, but Taylor, you got that lifestyles, the rich and famous life. You're kind of, you're out there a social butterfly. So I don't know, like your calendar, like you and Hubby
at my VIP table.
Yeah, you and Hubby are painting the town red, so we can't be sure about that, but that's okay.
No, I will. I will absolutely be here. I'm down, and I already talked about how I love the novella, so count me in.
You guys
Yeah.
down for that? I'm definitely down for that.
Yeah, of course.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
I'm gonna pick up the novella for sure, and we can reconvene.
I was
That's
going to read
exciting.
it next month because I'm just reading all indie next month. So
I
Ah,
love that. I love that so
I've got to
much.
prep.
yeah, yeah.
Gotta
I have the
prep
same
for
thing too.
July.
I have the same thing too. I have monthly reading themes. So next month is my Masters of Grimdark month, where I'm reading authors like Michael Fletcher, Ben Galley, um, Rob Hayes, and Clayton Snyder. But I will fit your book. I mean, your book can fall in anywhere. So, I don't need to have a special month for that. So I'll slide your book in wherever. So
It's small. Like I said, I devoured it in less than 2 hours. You know,
It's not too long.
awesome.
no,
Okay,
I could
perfect.
not stop.
It's
Could
a,
not
it's a
stop.
sweet little story. So you can
I don't
probably
know.
read it.
I don't know
in
if you want to
one-
put sweet in there.
I was like, I've seen that cover. I don't
It's a
think
story.
it's sweet.
It's a short story.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. This is Zamil, just once again, Conqueror's Blood was fantastic. You saw my review. You've seen the reviews from other people, obviously, and I was reading Taylor's review the other day, and I mean, you're just an amazing author, and hats off to you, and just really impressive work, and you're just building a body of work that and especially because it's so unique, and we certainly need more diverse fantasy, and Middle Eastern inspired fantasy. It's fantastic stuff. So it's really enriching the genre by having you here and what you write, and the fact that you're such a fantastic writer. So hats off to you, my friend.
Thank you. Writing is very. When you're sitting there in front of Microsoft Word, it's hard to make your brain do it. So for me, the only thing that makes it happen is I have to write what I really love, what I'm really passionate about. Otherwise it's just too mentally difficult to actually just write. So I just gotta pour in everything that I'm passionate about into every aspect of the story, and just make it basically every book that I write is a love letter to something. So and there's something that I'm just really want to show people and tell people about. So that's my whole thing. And it was having people, hearing that people appreciate that, and that they that came through onto the page, and they enjoyed that, and it affected them. That's, for me, that's the most satisfying thing as an author. Nothing beats hearing that.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure.
I have so much respect for authors who put what they love on the pages. I'm not brave enough to do that, and to put it out for other people to consume. So I really respect that for people who are willing to and can do that. Both PLN, Zamil, both.
Oh, thank
So
you.
much respect. I can't.
You never know what you can do till you do it. Taylor, you, Lana, Steve. Yeah,
I do
who
know
knows?
what I can do. Nobody wants to see that.
It's funny how many people say that they never do that, and then they wind up doing it. And if in a couple of years where Zamil and I are talking about these great books we're coming on, and now it's books by Steve, Taylor, and Lana, and we're saying, "Oh my gosh, it's so good," and we're breaking down your books. It can very well happen. So nothing.
If I ever
me.
get to that level, I will be infinitely blessed. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is. It's this experience, as Zamil, there's nothing like it. I think it was George R. R. Martin again that I think he said something like, well, I don't necessarily love the process as much, but I love seeing the finished product. I love having the book in my hand and seeing it out there. But I think, Zamil, excuse me, what comes out in your writing is that you still love the process, and you're working to get better. And you blew me away when you first said, well, I don't really plan my book. Hats off to you. I don't think the fact you write so well and you don't plan it to the degree that say someone like me does. Like I couldn't do that. Like, it's just amazing what you produce. But I can see the level of craft that you put into your book. It's amazing. So
Yeah, as you know, when you're writing, it's all a process, and your processes as you write more books also change. So at the beginning, it's just you got to get something down on the page, because the gap between what you have in your mind and actually what's going to appear on the page just seems so vast. As when you're a beginner author, it just seems like impossible to bridge that gap. So you just got to get something down. But as you write more books, your process evolves, and that's kind of my hope as an author now, that my process will just get better to the point where I can write more of these books. Hopefully I can write them faster than I already do, and it won't be at such a like taxing process. It'll be something which feels more feels more like a craft in a sense than just like a struggle with the word processor, right? So writing is all about growing, all about evolving as an author. So like now I do some planning. It does make it easier. It does save you on the rewrites. So my process is changing, and that's kind of exciting because you see some authors, like you mentioned, Bengali. That guy's written like 20 books or something. He's so prolific, and I'm in awe of those people: Rob Hayes, Bengali, Michael Fletcher, those guys, all of them, putting out so many great books so consistently. And me, as still I consider myself a beginner. I see them and I'm like, man, I want to be like that, and I'm somewhere on that road, hopefully. So
I can definitely testify you're on that road, Zamil. I mean, in the writing community, your name is, you're that rising star, man, in the writing community. I can definitely testify to that the difference between you and them is that they started earlier and they're ahead there. But I give you all I can give you is the biggest compliment I think that any writer can get is that when you see a writer write a great book, and then they managed to improve on that book in their second book, I think that's the hallmark of a great writer. And for me, you did that. You did that hands down. And I think that's a testament to what you're putting into the craft. Because if you're not on a road to continuous improvement, as you say, you're only as good as your last book. That you want people to be able to say that wow, Gunmetal Gods is great, but Conqueror's Blood, and now book 3, like you're definitely on that upward trajectory. So kudos to you, man. You can see it, and I'm a newbie too, right? I only have one book and one coming out, but like me, I know the compliments I look for when somebody goes, oh my god, book 2 so much better than book 1, Paul. That's a compliment, and I can say that about your book. Though book 1 was amazing, it was amazing, right? But yeah, I think book 2 was it was another level. So kudos.
thank you.
Yep.
I don't know if anyone can say more than that. But as readers, we certainly enjoyed it too. Sorry, Lana, go ahead.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, because like middle book or second book syndrome is a thing, especially like the amount that we read, we see it so often. Like the second book is just like the filler book in a trilogy or stuff like that. But this was definitely not that. It was just, yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if I think Zamil can attest to this. Is that, and I think I mentioned this last time, and I've said this in several podcasts with Steve. Steve and I talked about this a lot. I cannot describe the pressure as a writer, especially if you're writing a series, that if your first book anybody liked it at all, but they obviously there's going to be critiques and things you can improve on, and the pressure you feel as a writer to make that second book that much, like it is almost crippling, right? Like it is crippling. That imposter syndrome is just and You're trying to improve on the things that people are saying, oh, well, this. And then you're trying to preserve the things that people loved. And then you still want to write the book that you want to write. And you feel like you're torn in all these different directions. And at the end of the day, you're so nervous that your second book, isn't a flop, or you don't have what's called that sophomore jinx that, oh, well, Zamil didn't live up to the promise in his first book. He didn't. Oh, PL didn't, the first book, this is, like he tried to do too much this way. That stuff can really mess with you, man. And, but Zamil, you don't have to worry about that. It's done and it's great. So you're past that second book, that sophomore jinx or whatever you want to call it. So you're moving on to the next. So
Done and dusted.
That is, it's just like you said, when you're writing the second book, you want to take the strengths of the first book and expand upon them, and also develop new strengths, ideally. And with the difficulty with that is you yourself as an author don't always know what your strengths are, and you rely on other people to tell you. So some people with Gunmetal Gods, they would say, wow, the action was absolutely fantastic, and this other aspect was fantastic, and this aspect was fantastic. And then, or they might say this was weak, or this was weak, or this was weak. But people will not agree on that, and there'll be all kinds of opinions. So it's very difficult for you as an author to sit and assess yourself. And so with book 2, it was more just like, I just got to go back into the mind frame when I wrote book 1 and just write, and just not be pulled in different directions by both the positive and the negative comments. So, for example, I think Conqueror's Blood had less action than Gunmetal Gods. And that might have been a sticking point for some people, but that's just the story that I had to tell, and made it end up that way. So yeah, I think it's definitely hard as a writer when you've only written one book to really know who you are as a writer, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And yeah, that's
yeah, and even just like to not be able to feel like you can focus on what you feel you're good at, or what you like to write, versus what people want, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know for me, it was that, I love the world building aspect of books, right? And some people don't like that, and I respect that. Some people love it, but and I wrote battle scenes as just, okay, I felt it was something exciting and part of the narrative, but not something I was focusing on. But everybody's just like, oh my God, your battle scenes, you have to have more and less world building and more battle scenes, because your battle scenes are amazing. And you're like, but I want to write more world building. I'm sitting there, but I want to write more world building. And and then but you want to sell books too, and you don't want people to be turned off because they want more of your battle scenes, and you're like, okay, what am I going to do, right? And like you said, it just comes down to, I have to write the book I want to write, and that is the hardest thing. And like you said, not knowing what you're good at, right? I didn't think my battle scenes were particularly. I was looking at other people's like, oh yeah, they write great battle scenes, but then when people are saying, oh no, like that's a strength, and you're like, okay, well, but then what do you do with that, right? Do you change your book to make it more what people want, or do you? And like you said, I respect you so much that you just wrote the book that you felt it worked, right? But yeah, there's that pressure, like to say, like, okay, well, but they want this, they want to see this from me, or they expect me to turn it to this kind of writer, right? Because that's the other thing. It's not just about taking that part of what you write. It that can change how people perceive you as a writer. Oh yeah, Zamil, Akhtar, yeah, battle scenes, death and blood, and exploding, bombs and guns and that's but meanwhile maybe you're writing from the psychological aspect, or the human drama. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's tough.
I 100%. I went through the exact same thing, and I even told my editor, "Can you find somewhere to put more battle scenes in this story?" And she did find a lot of places, but I rejected all of them because I was like, this would just deter from the focus of the story. And like, if we're just gonna switch to these two characters fighting, like I was gonna have a fight. I think it was between Kato and Pashang. I was gonna have them have their own chapters and have them fight, but it just shifted the focus too much. So I just went with my gut feeling. And like you said, it might not be what will sell. It might not be what a lot of readers wanted. A lot readers love action. That's something I've noticed. Even action that is not, I would say, properly set up, they will still enjoy it. Whereas me, if I read an action scene, I want it to be set up perfectly. I want the stakes in that scene to be absolutely enormous. Otherwise, I have no interest reading action. It's just like a bunch of things happening on the page, a bunch of like swords hitting each other. It doesn't interest me that much. But I think a lot of readers just love action, whether the stakes are really well presented or not. So that's kind of where, and I think as an author, sometimes you differ with the market, and it's, as a beginning author, it's something I'm still trying to navigate and figure out.
Yeah. And it also has to play into what you write. Like if you write, like I just finished reading Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter. Fantastic author. I read Rage of Dragons. The guy writes action scenes. Like there's only a couple of writers in the genre that I think can top him, right? Like he is phenomenal. And he writes this book, and his world building is amazing. It's all woven in, and it's great. But that's what I expect from him. That's what he writes. But I don't I enjoy his books and I think they're phenomenal, but I love other kind of books. And it's great that he writes that way. And in reading, I just wrote my review and I said it's like reading his books is like swallowing a case of Red Bull, basically. You're just always just like up here, right? And I couldn't read 15 books like that in a row. It's exhausting.
Yep.
Right? I do want other books that are more about, like I said, more the psychological aspects and love and heartbreak and, found family, all these other things, but with his books, he has all those aspects there, but you tend to get lost in the battles because it's just so like you're up here, right? So, but that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate a totally different kind of book that has no battle scenes, but it's completely compelling, right? And I think, that's the difference, where when I read your books, I know I'm going to get some great action set pieces, but the stakes are going to be huge, right? I'm not saying the stakes aren't big in Evan Winter's book. I'm just saying that there's that build up, right? And I'm a slow burn. I love the slow burn type of books where it builds and then it's like that's more what I like. So, and like I said, it's not that I don't appreciate Evan Winter, because he's a phenomenal writer, and he'll burn through 500 pages in a day because he keeps you up there. But
look, I also love Evan Winter, but if Tao had two brain cells to rub together, half of those fights would not happen. He's not allowed to have two brain cells. So like those fights happen because a catalyst happens, So like I hear you though. You are always here because you're like, can you think for like 2 seconds? Like just 2, But that's like part of the magic of the book, right? Because if he was not that way, it wouldn't be what it is, right? So I think it depends on the characters, the world, what you're in for. So like, if we have characters in Gunmetal Gods or Conqueror's Blood doing what Tal does, it wouldn't be right for the character, because you'd be like, wait a minute, this is not what you do. Whereas Tal is like, all right, let's throw hands, 2 seconds in. Whereas the characters in this series, they're too, I don't want to say too smart for that, but they wouldn't do that. Yeah. They wouldn't do that, so it just, it depends on the world you're in. As a reader, for me personally, depends on the world you're in, the characters you're dealing with. It has to match, right? So, I recently read the super popular. I can't think of it. Oh my god. Shadow of the Gods. Thank you. Shadow of the Gods.
Yeah.
Like, that is. This is when I read that book, I was like, "This is why I read fantasy."
Yeah.
It's so good, but like
the
actions are the action scenes are bonkers, in the book. Like it, but it works because of the world it's in, right? So some books are built for that high speed, action all the time, and some are not. And I think as a reader, it really depends. Like if it's incongruous to the world, it's going to feel weird, right? If there were action scenes 24/7 in this book, it'd be like, So I think you made the right call for the world and the message you wanted to have. So it really just depends.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the Rage of Dragons because, he was super successful with that book, and I think he hit upon a formula that commercially is very well loved by the wider reader community, and that is this more action-focused book where the drama is not necessarily the interpersonal conflicts, but it's more about the character becoming stronger and struggling within themselves to, gain this strength so that they can, achieve their goal. And it was actually the Rage of Dragons is actually a big influence for the book I'm working on now. So that's kind of more in that vein, more in that action focused vein, very similar to the Rage of Dragons. And as an author, it'll be a relief for me. It was actually a relief for me to write a book that wasn't so intricate in in the dynamics and just more focused on action and kind of more of a, I don't want to say not dumber, but more like a popcorn kind of type of enjoyment.
I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. Same thing with my series, and part of it's just a natural evolution. But by the time you get to books 4, 5, 6, there's just mostly fighting. But because there's a reason for that, right? That's because the story had to go to those particular conflicts that have been built up in the initial books. But like it is kind of comforting to write a book that is, like you said, I don't want to say mindless, but and it's not, the violence isn't gratuitous, but because there's so much of it, you don't have to put as much thought into this one particular scene where that, like, now you're just like, things have all gone to hell, and it's just it's almost cathartic in a way, right? But at the same time, it's something that wears thin for me fast, because that's not what I'm looking for. Oh, sorry, there's a question. Sorry, Steve, I'll let you.
It's okay.
You do that.
Could the panelists discuss how to decide on an ending? Do they know how their books will end when they begin?
Zamil, this is your show, so you go first, man. This is your.
That's a really good question. I usually always know the ending when I begin because I write with an ending in mind, and I don't know the middle typically, but I know the beginning and I know the end. And that sort of guides me through the story as a writer. And it also helps the middle part of the book have more of a sense of purpose and not meander. And that's not every writer does that or writes like that. But for me, it's always helped because like I mentioned, writing is just a struggle, sitting there and writing. But when I have an amazing, mind-blowing ending in mind, and something I'm so excited to get to and build up to, that makes the whole process so much easier and just filled with, this excited energy that I have. So that's worked for me. It's just knowing the ending and visualizing it and seeing it in your mind and realizing, okay, what do I need to make this ending happen? What do I have to set up? And I think, I've mentioned before that I don't plan my books, or I don't plan them too much, but the ending is the one thing I've always had in mind when I started writing.
It's so funny because we're exactly the same. I write the last chapter of every book first, and feel I have to nail the last chapter, or else I haven't nailed the book. And the reason for me is because, well, with my book one, I ended it on a kind of a cliffhanger, right? And I wanted, and I think that's a risk for, especially as a novice author. I figure, you know what? I'm a nobody author. I'm a novice author. No one's gonna buy my book unless I make it something compelling. And I was like, this is the time to take a risk. And as an indie author, you can too, because I don't have a big trad house saying you cannot do that. Nope, because that's one of those cardinal rules. Don't end on a cliffhanger. For a lot of trad books. So I did. So and it worked. And then for book two, same thing. I although it doesn't end quite as and chaotically, I wanted to make sure the ending, which was the whole point of the book, that we get to this point, I want to write that scene in my head that this is the resolution, right? And with the third book coming up, because the ending is it's going to throw people's mind into like a tailspin. I agree with you. I'm very much an ending writer. The first chapter I usually write in a draft is that ending chapter, and I want to nail it because I have planned my book and I do know exactly what's going to happen. I find it easier, and it gives me that motivation, like you said, you got the goalpost. It's kind of like you've already scored the touchdown, right? You've already done it, so now you just gotta mark out how you got from one to from the other goalpost to this one. So yeah, write endings first.
Also, I know it's getting late, and Alana's got to go to bed soon, and Steve's been hosting for a minute. But if we, in the time I've been here, I've heard George R. R. Martin mentioned a couple times. So I just wanted to ask the authors in the room, like, your thoughts on, well, we don't know whether the ending he gave the show runners, they who shall not be named, but that, we don't know if that ending is exactly what the ending's going to be, and whether they flubbed the real ending or not. If you don't think it's flubbed, we can talk about that off air. But just asking the authors in a room, if you have an ending in mind, you've written it, this is your thing. If you were approached by someone, can I take on your story, right? Before you have the chance to get it out yourself, maybe life happens, whatever. But you have this chance to put it out in another media. Would you take that chance? Because seeing what I saw in season 8, arguably 7 of that, would you be willing to take the chance to put your baby in someone's hands? That's my question, essentially.
Go ahead, Zamil.
The ending.
Excellent question. Go ahead, Zamil.
If I put myself in George R. R. Martin's shoes for a minute and imagine this scenario you've described, for me, it would be very, very difficult to trust other writers and creators with something as important as an ending. Now, that's obviously separate from the whole financial. If they're going to give me $1 billion, whatever, do what you want, right?
Right. There's that too, of course.
Just from a purely creative perspective as a creator, not factoring in anything monetary, I would never accept that, because the ending is the most important part of the story, in the sense that it's the thing that people are left with when they're done with the story. And just look at Game of Thrones. When you mess up the ending, nobody talks about the show anymore, because
I will never rewatch it ever.
Yeah,
never.
It had the most brilliant 4 seasons, and even the
Yep.
5th and 6th seasons were also very good.
So
but nobody really talks about it because the ending got totally messed up. So as a creator, no way, I would rather leave it unfinished than have it end badly. Because when something is unfinished, it can be a topic of discussion, and it can be a topic of theorizing. And people will talk about it endlessly and theorize how it could have ended. And you'll still be relevant in the conversation. And Song of Ice and Fire is still talked about because the books haven't ended yet. People still do that. But because the show ended so badly, and because it was mentioned that this was sort of the ending that George R. R. Martin had in mind. Because of these two things, the enthusiasm for the books has also waned a lot. And obviously it's taken 11 years to write a book. So that's a big factor too. So, I would not take that deal. Nope.
You know, it's funny. We're all, I'm sure. We're very aware of all the elements here. Like, Bookborn, Zach Argyle, amazing, fantasy author, indie fantasy author. His wife, Bookborn, she's a YouTuber, and she did an really compelling video about do writers like Martin and Rothfuss owe us to finish their series, right? Great video. If it's out there, I recommend you watch it. Putting myself in the shoes, and I can't obviously because I'm not him, and he's an iconic writer of someone like George R. R. Martin, and realizing that in a way, and this isn't a criticism, not disparaging him, that in a way you sold your soul to the devil, in that you've allowed, you've made a hell of a lot of money, right? You've made a hell of a lot of money selling your story to the big screen and letting them adapt it the way they want, and before you'd actually finish the books, and letting them kind of forge their own ending, which was highly unpopular. That whereas you've taken this beloved series and your own books, which are beloved, and now you potentially compromised it because in my mind, my friends and I talk about this all the time. My writer friends, I don't know if you guys in the community do. We always talk about the fact that one of our theories is that George R. R. Martin is just plain scared to write those last couple books, because he does, what is he going to do now? How is it ever going? Because the ending was so bad, because as Zamil said, people believe they obviously had his notes, and like, how is he going to salvage that? How is he going to salvage that and make his series end a way that people are still going to love? Would you do that? So as a writer, I would just be horrified, right? Because on top of that, I'm looking at my bank account and going, well, the next 3 generations of the Stuarts are set for life, the next 10, but at the same time, I've sold my soul, my creation, and it's been morphed into something that is highly unpopular. And I might think, well, if only I had the chance to write my books first, I could have properly, given that ending. I could have made it believable that Daenerys turned. I could have done all these other things, but now that's been robbed from me, right? And so I seeing specifically his experience, because his experience is unique. You can't. There's no other equivalent in the literary world that
Agreed.
A writer that popular wrote books that were that popular, that sold the rights to make a show that popular and that iconic, that was so messed up at the end that people wrote petitions about, the hate mail, I would just want to hide in my house and not come out, right? Like what do you? Yeah. So seeing that, there's no way I would write, not for all the money in the world, because I guarantee you, yes, I'm sure George R. R. Martin is happy about his bank balance, but as a creative, I'm sure that he's totally devastated about what's happened, and I think it's affected his writing, and I don't think he's ever going to finish that series, specifically because of that. That's just my theory. I know nothing. That's just my speculation. But based on what I've seen, would you trade all that money and all that fame for not being able to finish something that you really love? Because as writers, that's everything to us, right?
Yeah. I really respect both of your responses to that. And something I would put to the readers here, for Lana and Steve, but for me personally, like not Game of Thrones, I'm sorry, the Lord of the Rings, right? Like that was a done deal before adaptations happened. So from my experience in reader circles or media consuming circles, there's like those who have read the books and they love that, and there's those who have read watch the movies and they love that, and those who do both, but they're separate and they're respected as separate. But because there was an end line, so the ending was written in both cases essentially. So I don't know if that's actually the line drawn, but to me it seems that's the case, whether the ending has been completed or not, and it can be separated into 2 separate entities. you know? So as someone who loves both franchises, I know people who do not, you know, whether it be the books or the movies, you know? So that's my experience as being a reader, but I would just pass that off, you know, to Lana or Steve or whatever the series, maybe you've had the experience. But for me, it seems like the ending, if you stick the ending on your own and then someone else adapts it in their own way, they're seen as separate entities. Whereas Game of Thrones, I think, as PL said, is very unique. And I don't think it can be replicated in that they were both happening at the same time and one finished before the other, you know? So I would just pass that off to Lana or Steve, you know, what your experience is.
Well, I'll never rewatch Game of Thrones. Well, I tried to rewatch it one time and it was really disappointed again the second time. So yeah, I agree that it's if you don't stick the landing, then it's no good. And I don't see the books ever being finished. And he's in a really difficult position because he'll never please anyone with no matter what he chooses to do. It's a no-win situation for him.
Also, go ahead, Lana.
I was just going to agree. But I differ in that I will watch season 1 again, and only season 1 because of Khal Drogo.
Oh, man. It's also a cautionary tale about creating so much complexity and so many plot threads that it just becomes, even for one dude to sit there and try to close all these plot threads and try to make sense of this enormous plot that he's created and to wrap it up in a satisfying way. He's probably more tempted to just go on creating more plot threads because that's what he's been doing this whole time. And it takes a completely different mentality to, instead of create more plot threads, to start to put them all together and make them make sense. It's a completely different skill set. And George R. R. Martin, for all his success, we don't have any indication that he has that skill set to actually write an ending. We've not seen an ending from him of a story of this complexity. And, you know, even Wheel of Time, Brandon Sanderson had to come in and end it because that was also something that was just too complex. And obviously, sadly, the author died. But and George R. R. Martin is not willing to have someone write it after he dies. So unfortunately, you know, that's also a factor here is what would happen if the author passes away before he can finish. But it is a cautionary tale. Like I always think about this, like, am I just creating plot threads just to keep the drama going? I think the show Lost is a good example of this. Some of you have seen that. Just create more mysteries and plot threads and just never resolve them. So it's a cautionary tale for authors. Have that skill to actually resolve your plot threads and end a story.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I know people have to probably run off and stuff, but quickly, I just want to say, Zamil, you're exactly right. And I think that's always been for me personally because of how I write it, because I'm writing this expansive universe that's going to go like this and then come back down in the end and resolve all those threads. I know that I'm much more cognizant because specifically of George R. R. Martin that I have to make sure that I wrap things up just enough that, I mean, God forbid if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and I can't finish the series, obviously, you know, they're going to get left undone regardless. But I want to make sure that there's still enough conclusion, quote unquote, with every book that someone can say, oh, it's too bad, you know, like P.L. got to book 18 or 20 and passed away, never finished or whatever. But there's enough there that enough is satisfactorily wrapped up that people are going to go, okay, you know what, too bad, but at least we got enough gratification out of where he left it when he had to leave it, right? And unfortunately, Jamil is so right. With George R. R. Martin, there is no gratification. He's off in the Dorn plot here, and he's off with this here. And like Jamil said, how do you take those tentacles and bring them all the way back down? Mind you, in 2 books, right? In 2 books. He's got Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring planned, right? How are you going to do that? Are they going to be 3,000 pages each? Like, how are you going to do that, right? There's no, I can't even foresee a scenario where he can do that unless the books are just, they're complete tomes. His books are already tomes, right? So yeah, I think he's done. I think he's off writing whatever and consulting on, movie. Like I think he's done.
Elden Ring,
Oh, yeah.
just throwing that out there. He was, he's getting his money and now he's getting his coin in other ways. So
Yeah. House of the Dragon, consulting on House of the Dragon or whatever he's doing. He wrote. Think what he wrote. He went back and wrote Fire and Blood. Why? He wrote a huge compendium of the history of Westeros and the Targaryen kings and queens. Why? Because he wanted to stay in that universe, but he knew, and there's a second one part planned, right? He has a second one of that Fire and Blood coming because he knew I still want to be there, but I can't do. You know what I mean? You might even see him going back creating more prequels because it's easier, right? Rather than finish that series. So
I think that's the nature of writing and ending, is that it's about simplification. And he's someone who loves complexity and making things more complex. That's why he writes these detailed histories, that are like crazily nuanced and just full of the most intricate details, because that's what he enjoys doing. I don't think he enjoys, like in the show, they blew up the set and killed half the cast. That was their way to simplify the story. I don't think he enjoys doing that. So I also think there's the chance that the series will end is just astronomically low.
it's really a shame, because if the rumors are true and the ending he wrote was the ending, like that could have been perfection, if it was carried off correctly. It really it makes complete sense for the character arc as long as it's handled correctly. So it's just a shame, so that's why I put that question out there, because I feel like you can have that fire ending. It's just, it's hard.
Yeah. Can you imagine if the actual TV show had built up Daenerys properly to make it believable when she turned?
Oh my God, I would have fucking loved that.
It would have been, it was so. It really, truly, it was anticlimactic when Jon killed her. It was completely anticlimactic. It didn't feel earned. Nothing felt earned in that whole last season, especially. Nothing felt earned.
It's even more of a shame because I think people, I think it could have led the way into the number of people who love unhinged women in the fantasy world right now. Like, I don't know if Steve and Lana have put their finger on this pulse, but unhinged women are the thing. They are the thing. And myself included, I'm not projecting. I love that. So many people do. And if it is delivered in a way that people can grasp, that would have been, they could have spearheaded that. They could have spearheaded that whole trend. Because it's, Conqueror's blood. Honestly, Zamil, when I was talking to people about this, friends of mine, they were, should I read Gunmetal Gods? I'm like, well, I mean, if you like unhinged women, and they're like, I'm there, that's all they had to say, to get them interested. So I feel like Game of Thrones could have spearheaded that, Trailblazer, exactly. Well, now, you know what? It's your chance, Zamil. You could spearhead it now.
There you go.
Hey, I'll take over I'll take over Song of Ice and Fire if he wants.
If need be.
I'll write the ending.
But just spearheading everything. It was because we all know it wasn't just the whole Daenerys line. It was everything. It was Jon, after killing her, we'll just imprison him and hold him for a trial. The bloodthirsty factions of especially the Dothraki are gonna just Jon Snow, he's a good guy, oh no, we're scared of all the Northmen that we will have to fight, since we live for fighting, if we just outright took off his head. And oh no, the Unsullied, they're good with that. You killed Daenerys, no biggie, my Khaleesi, no worries. And then he just gets off. And believe me, Jon Snow's my favorite character, but I'm like, there is no way he would have walked out there alive in any realistic scenario. None. after killing
You know
Daenerys.
what? Endings don't have to be super conclusive either. I don't know if you guys have seen The Wire, but
Yeah.
that's my all-time
Oh, yeah.
favorite show.
Oh yeah,
And it doesn't end like the world is saved. You
Yeah.
know, it ends with the exact opposite message. The conflict is just going to keep going, and the cycle is just going to repeat.
Mhm.
So Game of Thrones could have ended in a similar sense. It could have just ended, showing that, yeah, there's a new conflict brewing, and it's just going to be just like the old conflict. And it could have sent that kind of message. And I think that's what George R. Martin was trying to say, that, um, these kind of wars and this violence is just never ending, and it'll just keep going, and it'll just keep spawning new conflicts. I think that's kind of his message in the story. So it didn't have to end like happily ever after. Now you have a just king, and now the world, everything's going to be great. That kind of didn't make any sense to me.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thematically.
Well, honestly, for me, when they were like, when Sam, who was like, democracy, what about it? And they laughed at him. I was like, oh, this could be good, right? Because that's the point, right? When they laughed. And then they were like, Bran the Broken. And I was like, you fucked it up. You had it. You fumbled it. You dropped it. Like there was a moment. There was a moment there. So
You're so right.
Exactly. I thought they were going to talk about the perpetuation of the cycle. Essentially, like the wheel is, well, not to go to wheel time, but the wheel is not broken. The cycle is not broken, but then they were like, psych, it is, and I was not a fan.
So many
It goes
things wrong
against
with that.
Everything. It goes
so many
against
things
everything the show set up.
It just they messed up for me, and here I am rewriting one of the greatest writers that everybody has their own, we can sit here and do that, but yeah, they if I could rewrite Game of Thrones, I would have left the existential threat of the White Walkers till the very end to resolve. I wouldn't have the fact that they knocked that off and then came back to resolve the petty conflicts. To me, I would have had the petty conflicts get to the end. Somebody's dead. Either it's Jon, Daenerys, Cersei, whoever, whichever faction wins, doesn't matter. But there's only one ruler now, and now that ruler has to confront the existential threat, right? Rather than kill off the extra. It was so I felt cheated with the whole with everything. Like, yeah, great action sequence and everything, but it's like, so then, oh, okay, yep, they're defeated. The threat to humanity is ended. Okay, so now we go back and now we have the petty fights.
It's just awful. Like, didn't someone look at these scripts and just didn't they have someone review these scripts and just mention and tell them this? Like, this is just bad storytelling 101. Why?
It's just such a shame. It really is, because the potential and the fact, I don't know, I don't want to speak for Steve and Lana, but the fact that a nerdy fantasy book that all of us were like, how dare you like that, when it's not cool, it became The Thing, everyone was watching The Thing, and even Hayato, he liked The Thing, and it was fantasy, and I was so excited. And then we watched the last couple seasons, and both of us were so upset. And so just to see, I think for people who are book lovers or fantasy lovers, or Lord of the Rings is getting its, due now, I guess. It's kind of getting a little bit of a renaissance. But when it was first released, it was popular, but with the people who already liked it. It wasn't really popular. So I don't want to speak for other people, but for me, I was validated. Fantasy is cool, y'all, and then it just kind of blew up. And that really, for me as a reader, I was like, ah, damn, we almost had it.
Nothing can quite replace it, or has replaced it so far.
Yeah, Steve and Lana, has anything replaced Game of Thrones for you too?
No.
No, I can't think of anything that's been like that.
TV show wise, no. I feel like I've mentioned both Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones in this, but both of them were kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but the world was dirty. The world was lived in. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, lived in. And a lot of the adaptations I've seen, Wheel of Time is the first one that comes to mind, but there are other ones that have come out, Witcher as well, where the dirt kind of looks like the person put it on their face right before it started, you know? And like, that's cool, but like the budget you have, it'd be nice if I could believe that this is the world that I read about, you know? So for me, it's not that it's like they all suck and it can never be the same, but I haven't like dived into a world that felt like the characters lived there since then.
Most of the like, oh, sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead.
Oh, it's Pierre. Sorry. I think most of the like adaptations that I've seen just haven't had the budget. So, like, especially because when I was younger, I read what's it called? The Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind. It was like the first book, I think. And they like brought out a TV series, but it was just so low budget and it was just horrible. The casting was horrible. And I was just like, why even bother? Like, it's just, you're just going to be disappointing everyone and just wasting money, essentially. I was like, it could have easily been better, especially when they don't even stick to the book. It's like just a loose adaptation of it. I'm just like, the people that are going to watch this are the diehard fans that have read all of the books, and you've just ruined this for them. Nobody else is going to watch it because it's for fantasy nerds that have read these books. So that's like, I always wait, even with Game of Thrones, I wait until I know that it's good. And I've heard people say it's good because I've just been disappointed so many times. So I always wait.
Yeah. I still haven't for whatever reasons. Maybe because Game of Thrones had the luxury of all those seasons and all those hours of TV. I still have, and credit to George R. R. Martin, especially with those first 4 seasons where we were following the book really closely. I still haven't found characters that I cared about as much. I'm a character-driven person, right? Your book can be so in terms of, but if your characters are compelling, you have me. I'm in love, and I still don't care about. There's very few characters on TV, movies, etc., fantasy that I've ever cared about the way I've cared about Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Arya, Sansa, all these people, Bronn, you name them, right? I haven't found those characters on TV that I've just really cared about what happened to them. Maybe it's because the actor's portrayal, maybe it's a combination of a lot of things, but like I just haven't found that on TV that I'm so invested in the characters. I was really invested in Jon, for example, right? He was, as stupid as he was half the time, and as ridiculous as the things that he did. I love the guy, right? He was that doofus that was the heart of gold, right? And seriously, like Battle of the Bastards, like that scene when Jon has Ramsay and he's just hammering him, I was up out of my. It's like I was jumping up and down, like I was so invested in the whole thing. Haven't found it yet. Again,
Yeah. Oh my God, that for all his flaws, Martin is an amazing writer. Like when I'm reading A Song of Ice and Fire, it's like nothing else. It's the characters, the way he describes settings, the way he sets up a scene. Everything is just, the details just bring everything to life in a way which I, as a reader, can't get from any other source. And that's what inspired me to write too. It's like, oh man, I want to be like this. I want to do something like this. But the guy is just like, when it comes to character, making you care about characters that are complicated and characters that just, I mean, yeah, it's amazing writing. And I agree, I haven't seen anything in fantasy adaptations. I haven't seen anything that comes close. I think there are like historical Ironically, Game of Thrones didn't spawn so much fantasy. It spawned a lot of historical shows, and those have been kind of good. A lot of those have been really good. But as a fantasy reader, I want fantasy too. So
Yeah.
it's like I want that mix, but animating dragons is very expensive. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to shit on budgets, when I was talking about haven't been able to produce it. I know budgets are a big thing, but it's just not. Yeah, it's too clean. That's the complaint I have. It's too clean. It's too pretty for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I go back to that same scene with John, and he's been through the battle, and you can see he's caked with blood and other people's blood and dirt and grime, and he's, his hair is just like, he's been through, it's just I guess, like as Taylor said, with the budget, the budget to see people ripped in half and like, I guess it's, a lot of it comes down to finances, right? But yeah. But anyways, yeah, I know we have to go eventually. It's so hard because I love talking to you guys. I love talking about stuff, and it's like I know it's like, oh, this has been 3 hours. I'm looking at the time. I'm going, holy moly, right? Poor Lana's probably falling asleep, and and Taylor's been out partying and with hubby and everybody's, and poor Steve is like, I said, I put the meme on our little chat group that is the thick eyes.
I think
pop. Like that's
so much respect for how early you got up, man. Like I could never. Bow down.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
It's a small price to pay to talk with you, Awesome.
Well, we've already made a date, right? For the we haven't made a date, but we've made a commitment to the novella, which I've already read. Yes. So like tomorrow's fine if you guys are ready.
Well, that's Thanksgiving time tomorrow, which would be nice. That was just really bad planning this day, but I do have to run. But thanks to everybody for coming by and chatting, and it's always a pleasure. So looking forward to chatting about the novella, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Love you guys. It's always an honor. Thank you, Steve, so much for arranging this. You're incredible. Just know what a fantastic person and creator you are, and this is the kind of content I think people just can be so drawn to. And I know it was long, and of course, Zamil, thank you so much for writing these amazing books, and wishing you nothing but success. And you already have it, but it's just only going to continue. And we're nowhere without people like Lana and Taylor to get the word out there about our books and what you guys do to promote it. And thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,